For the record, my name is John Fitzgerald, District 3 City Councilor, and I'm the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Public Health, Homelessness, and Recovery. Today is December 2nd, 2024. This hearing is being recorded. It is also being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-TV and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, FiOS Channel 964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.health@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. Public testimony will be taken at the end of this hearing. Individuals will be called on in the order in which they signed up and will have 2 minutes to testify. If you're interested in testifying in person, please add your name to the sign-up sheet near the entrance of the chamber. If you're looking to testify virtually, please email our central staff liaison, Karishma Chauhan, at Karishma, KARISHMA CHOUHAN at boston.gov for the link, and your name will be added to the list. Today's hearing is on docket number 0998, order for a hearing regarding Boston LGBTQ+ youth community spaces and their public benefits. This matter was sponsored by Councilors Henry Santana, Tanya Fernandez-Anderson, and Benjamin Weber, and was referred to the committee on June 12th, 2024. Today I'm joined by my colleagues in order of arrival, Councilor Flynn and Councilor Santana. Councilor Weber, thank you guys for being here. I'll open it up for a quick 1-minute opening remark from the sponsors and our other councilors. So be it. Henry, we can start with you, sir.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to my colleagues, panelists, and members of the public. Thank you for joining us today for this important hearing on Boston LGBTQ+ youth community spaces for the public health and benefits. LGBTQ+ youth in Boston face disproportionate challenges, including heightened risk for anxiety, depression, and suicide. These challenges are not just statistics, they are real-life barriers that impact young people in our communities every day. While school-based resources like GSAs plays an essential role, today's hearing focuses on community spaces outside of school, while LGBTQ+ youth can find support, affirmation, and connection. This is about ensuring that Boston is a city where every young person feels valued, safe, and supported, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Our goal today is to explore how community spaces, whether physical, virtual, or programmatic, can foster mental and physical well-being for our LGBTQ+ youth and identify how the city can better support these initiatives. I look forward to hearing from our panelists whose lived experience, research, and expertise will guide us in creating a more inclusive and supportive Boston. Let us use this as an opportunity to listen, learn, and commit to meaningful action. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Santana. Councilor Weber?
Thank you. Thanks for being here. You know, as a longtime resident of Boston, as a parent of 2 children in BPS, I think it's very important that we have safe spaces for all of our kids, and you know that includes safe spaces for the LGBTQ community. You know, I think it's especially troubling now that I think 19 states in the last year passed laws restricting access to gender-affirming medical care for minors. And you know, I think if you read the newspaper or watch the news, you feel like this community is under attack nationwide, and it's important for us as a city to stand up and be a place where people feel welcome and people feel like they can be their true selves, and I look forward to being part of that process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Weber. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the sponsors. Thank you to the panel for being here, for the important work that you are doing. The opportunity to talk to the panel this morning, outstanding leaders, not just in the LGBTQ community, but throughout the city on so many other issues. We're lucky to have strong leaders such as this dedicated group here. This is a civil rights issue, and looking forward to working with my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. I would now like to introduce the first of today's three panels that we have. This is our youth panel. We have Elon, Oliver, and Levi. Folks, thank you so much for being here today. It's great. I assume that you all have signed off hall passes to be out of school, to be here today. We're okay? We're not going to get in trouble for that? Okay, just checking. I don't want to be held responsible. I understand you guys have a brief presentation to make?
It just goes along with what I have to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll turn it over to you guys. You guys just please introduce yourself, and then we'll be happy to listen. We'll do questions after your presentation.
Should we introduce one at a time?
Yeah, as you guys go, sure.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Elon. My pronouns are he, him, and they. I am a student at Milton High School, and I am here today to talk about queer youth community spaces. So a youth community space is just a place where youth can come to socialize, to learn, to meet new people, and in not only Massachusetts but the entire United States, queer youth have been struggling to find places like this to fit in. The mental health has been troubling. You can see the rates of anxiety and depression, this is in Massachusetts particularly, is 71% for anxiety and 51% for depression for youth, mental health of queer youth, which is far higher than that of their non-queer counterparts. There's anti-trans legislation and anti-queer legislation rising rapidly around the country. You can see this is from 2021 to 2024, and so this has gone up, but in correlation to that, you can see that in Massachusetts alone, 90% of LGBTQ plus youth have seen a negative effect in their well-being from this anti-trans rhetoric. This is in Massachusetts, a place with which has very little of this legislation, so you can only imagine how this compares around the country. You can see this affects not only mental health but physical health. There's been up to over a 72% increase in suicide attempts by transgender and gender nonconforming youth, often in correlation to the hopelessness caused by the feeling that everyone does not value their presence and their life. And in schools, it has also been seen that hate crimes have been rapidly rising. This is a graph from 2018 to 2022. You can see just the leap between 2019 and 2020. And we can only imagine how this is going to continue to grow. It shows no sign of stopping at the moment. So what we have seen, Oliver and I have created one very well-working queer space at the Milton Public Library. We are both students at Milton High School. And what we have seen so far is people coming together from multiple schools, multiple age groups, many different backgrounds to collectively form this space of community, of learning, and of just a feeling of being safe. We have seen, honestly, I have seen people grow. This has been going on for a couple of years now. I've seen people grow from being very shy and not so outgoing to becoming these larger, more outgoing personalities who will speak up for themselves, who will advocate for themselves. And I do believe that there is a correlation between having this space to openly be themselves and to develop themselves in a place that they feel that they can take up space. Having these spaces allows a space for them to really feel like they belong and that they are allowed to be there and that they are allowed to just exist as people in a society that so often tells them that they are not supposed to exist, that they are not allowed to exist, that they must shrink themselves into something smaller for the comfort of those around them. It's a place of peer support. If somebody is having a hard day, they can talk to another person. We have a program that is really the youth tell what is needed and what is wanted, and then we have an adult supervisor, a librarian in our case, though this could vary if this took place in different areas. All that you need for a queer space is the youth, a space, a physical space, an adult sponsor or supporter, and maybe some snacks. And really that's all that it takes in something that can have such an impact, a positive impact on someone's mental health, and can just help someone grow as a person, and could even be life-saving in some scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Oliver, and my pronouns are he, him. I also go to Milton High School, which I don't think anyone mentioned, but it's a suburb of Boston, just south of here. And I am also a founder of our queer space. When we started this program, it was because none of us really felt comfortable expressing who we truly were at school. I have friends who, when we started this program, I have friends who were never out at school, and they did not feel comfortable sharing their true identity with their teachers or their peers in fear of being found out or made fun of. Originally, I did go to our school GSAs, but oftentimes it would devolve into just ranting about the current state of the world or being stressed about the peers that were making fun of them, and it often didn't lead to anything productive or even comfortable. So when we started this space, it was to make sure that everyone had a space where they can be safe and feel like they can make a change. We started this program with students who don't go to our schools, which was a huge change from the school GSAs. We have students who were homeschooled or who just had dropped out because of personal reasons. And it's made such a difference, as Elon said. It's such a good way to interact with our peers, interact with people who we wouldn't interact with normally, and it's a great space to be ourselves. It's a lot of socialization, but also a lot of it is when we feel comfortable, we break off into groups and talk about the current events. So what I'm sort of proposing with this is either GSAs become a safer, more accepting, more open space for students, or we promote this initiative in spaces outside of school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Levi Cruz, and I use pronouns like he and they. I am 22 years old, so although I'm not a high schooler, unfortunately sometimes, I am a toddler teacher just outside of Boston. And although I am over 21 and I am an adult, I am still a part of a percentage that makes up Bagley, which is our community center that is youth-led and adult-supported. I, just along with everyone else who's 29 and under, 25 and under for certain things at our center, I utilize a lot of our services that are offered at Bagley, which we can only offer with the support of a lot of our community. Community centers have given me the chance to improve my person in its entirety. My mental health is supported by Bagley, my physical health is supported by Bagley, my relationships are supported by Bagley, which makes it that much easier to live in a society, especially with one that can be so against who I am. And Bagley has provided me with resources that I don't have in my everyday life, like certain educational things that I would have never learned in school and social connections that I wouldn't have gotten anywhere else, which is really, really appreciated. Our space offers vital things that I know have helped me as a person and that I've seen help so many other people. It offers things like gender-affirming supplies, food. There's a washing machine and dryer, which can be expensive if you don't have it in your house. And it just has, I've seen firsthand just being there in our community space that it offers such life-changing things that people from the outside may not see. And I think it's really important to continue to offer that and be a part of that, and also want to support people who want that for the community. With their Bagley is pretty accessible for most, but not for all, which can be kind of, heartbreaking when there's someone out way in Western Mass who can't get to somewhere. There should be more community centers. People should be able to go where they are welcomed and safe. And I'm hoping that more people understand that, and that it can be just so much more than something you just drop into. If that's what you need, that's what we have, but also there is just so much more. Thank you.
Thank you. And Elon, Oliver, and Levi, thank you very much for being up here on our first panel today. We're now going to turn over to questions from our fellow counselors. They'll each have 4 minutes to ask you guys some questions. They don't have to use all of their time, but they will if they want to. And we will start with our sponsor, Councilor Santana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for our panelists for being here. Really appreciate your presence, but also your testimonies. Elon, I know you talked about what goes into actually creating some of these one of these spaces. In an ideal world, I mean, you talked about physical space, bringing youth. You mentioned an adult sponsor. Am I correct? What's the role of that adult sponsor? How did you go about finding that adult sponsor? And yeah.
Well, at our library, you'll actually see Tyler up there. And Tyler is a youth librarian, a teen librarian at our library, and is in charge of the teen programs. Tyler was very supportive in creating this space for us and helping us create this space. It really takes just one person, just one supportive adult in the community to bring together this group. To organize, find a day, reserve a room, and obtain whatever resources, perhaps collect some news stories to keep everyone up to date on what the goings on in the world. But just one supportive adult in any way. This could be a volunteer or someone who is part of a program like a librarian or at a community space. This does not necessarily need to be a queer adult, just in someone who supports queer youth.
Yeah, no, thank you. And then, you talked about how this this physical space gives ability, impacts your, the mental health and physical being. Can you just go more into detail about, and maybe share examples of individuals, who felt, that they came into your space, that they didn't feel good about themselves or struggling with mental health, or struggling with finding a community, and then you talk about the structures that you put in place. Is it very relaxed? Like who structures the space? I know you mentioned socializing. I just want to know more of an idea of what this space looks like, and what resources could potentially be available.
Oliver, feel free to jump in on this one. One perfect example of this is someone who was struggling. I believe it was in their junior year, so they were 17, I want to say, or 18, and was struggling pretty badly with mental health, which caused them to have to drop out of school. They ended up finding, they came to the library quite frequently. They're one of the founders of this program, and ended up finding this program and meeting a lot of people who they would not have met outside because they were homeschooled and were no longer in school, and therefore did not have the resources that the school provided. They were able to find this program and meet a lot of new people, which really became like a catalyst for them to just kind of feel this sense of belonging and determination to continue to persevere in life and with everything going on in the world around them. They ended up moving a couple states away, but still come back pretty often. Ended up moving back, and I believe is now working on getting their GED. That comes with the support of having an adult with resources as well as a community of youth. That's just one example. I can give more.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Again, really appreciate our panelists here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Santana. Councilor Weber.
Thank you. And thank you all for your testimony. So I guess if we're talking, I know we're supposed to be talking about outside of schools, but first start inside of school. If somebody's looking to start a space like this, like what is the process that you recommend? Where, does it start with kids? Does it start with teachers? How do you get something like this up and running?
I would say it has to start with the students. If a teacher tries to start this club and there's no interest, I know at our middle school, after we left, the GSA kind of crumbled because there was no interest anymore. So having students who are interested and then them finding an adult they trust and who is willing to, give them a room to talk about this. And then after that, it's up to the staff member. It's sort of just like a normal club. The staff member has to, file for however making a club works. I don't know. I've never been on the end of that, but yeah.
Okay, and then outside of schools, I guess we heard about libraries. I mean, is there, what kinds of spaces work? What do we look for in a space? What would be on your top of your list of things that would need to be in place to make a space successful?
Well, we use the conference rooms in our library because oftentimes this is a more personal experience, I would say, than a regular club. So having that space separated from, it's still public space, but it's more private in a way, if that makes sense. So somewhere that's accessible to everyone, but still a little bit separated is the ideal space, at least for me.
So
I was going to say, some of the places that we were considering for use for these programs would be places such as branches of the Boston Public Library or BCYF locations. It just needs to be a place that is accessible to the people around it. Often close to public transport is a good idea. And then, as Oliver said, somewhere fairly private, just a private room, which all of these places have. Just a conference room works, somewhere with chairs and a table.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, in a city the size of Boston, would you advise, we have something in each neighborhood, or would it be better in the central library, people coming together there?
So I think what would be most beneficial is finding out what communities need what. So I wouldn't necessarily say that one in, every 2 blocks would make sense, but I definitely think that a general location that continues to be accessible would be very nice. I think even utilizing our really, really awesome schools, like our community colleges or some of our bigger colleges that have these rooms, I think that would be really beneficial because a lot of them are off of public transportation. And I would say just Yeah, more frequently. I mean, we are fortunate enough here in Boston to have a lot of schools around and a lot of spaces. So I think that would be the better, I guess the more like better bang for your buck. I guess I could put it.
So you would rather have something that it would be near where you lived as opposed to like, I live in JP, you could use the JP library, but I think other people might want to get out of their home neighborhood and go somewhere else and meet people from, interact with people from around the city. But so I think what I'm getting from you is local would be preferable.
Yeah, just somewhere, I mean, especially since these are students, transportation can be an issue. And so having something that's fairly close to them is important. Of course, there is potential with these programs to kind of create some sort of overarching board with like representatives from each area that could come together to create events that are like that bring together different communities, different groups to meet each other, and which can be really cool to meet people from outside of where you live, gain perspective, and just meet new friends. Because above all, it is a social space. It is a place to meet new people, and any way to do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, thank you to the panel for being here. I'd like to start off in asking, have we seen, whether it's in Milton or Boston or any of your friends, have we seen any hate crimes against the LGBTQ community, especially the young people in the community? Have we seen a rise in that over the last several years?
Absolutely. In our school system, at least, there was several incidents, people looking up each other's skirts, people making jokes when we wore pride flags to school, so much so that we had to, me and Alon and a couple friends, implement a curriculum about hate speech and teaching the students what hate speech is and why it's so bad. So, it's definitely rising, and having these spaces just makes it easier to cope with that. Yeah, microaggressions and macroaggressions are prevalent and have really only grown in the past few years. In our experience, and I know this is a common experience for many queer youth, administration often, when confronted with the incidents that have occurred, even with evidence like video evidence of surveillance cameras, find a way to just walk around it, or when reporting incidents that have occurred of microaggressions or macroaggressions, often we have received no response. If it's over email or even in person, it's always, we'll do something next time it happens. And then when the next time it does happen, nothing ends up happening. So having these spaces and having these resources and a trusted adult is just crucial to the well-being of youth.
I think I have seen an increase. I mean, I've been out of high school for a little bit now, but I remember when I was in high school that it was easy for other people to dish out disrespect and microaggressions and things like that and hateful rhetoric, and it be overseen and overlooked. And it was, my own problem to deal with if someone did it to me, which is really, really difficult. And I mean, even now in the world that we live in, I think it would be kind of hard for anyone to deny that there is a lot more hateful rhetoric going around, which is unfortunate. So to answer your question, I'd say, yeah, I have seen a lot. And I mean, even personally, I've gone through a lot as well.
Thank you. Then my final question is, have you done any work, or have you reached out to Bridge Over Troubled Waters? I know they do some excellent work in helping the youth on some of these issues, but I know they have a tremendous record in the city and throughout Greater Boston as well. But is that a partnership that you have worked with or learned from?
I know a little bit about their organization. I don't think I've gotten the chance to yet connect with them, but from what I've seen, they seem amazing, and also from a lot of our other allies and sponsors and companies that really help us, like community spaces like Bagley or MTPC and, you know, the Identity Project. They all do a lot of amazing work as well.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council. We've also been joined by Council Pepin. Council, question's yours. Oh, it was Liz first? Didn't see Liz. Sorry, Council Braden. How are you? We're joined by Council.
Just hiding out here in the corner.
That's okay. All right. Well, why don't you ladies first, Ms. Braden?
Thank you. Thank you all for being here this morning. I'm just curious about the reaction. I know we're in a very difficult time right now. The reaction, has there been any reaction from parents, other parents who are sort of anti-LGBT, having an anti-LGBT, have you had objections to having a safe space in a school for LGBT youth? Have you had any reaction from other parents who may not be on the same page as we are?
We have not personally encountered that. That is something that has happened for sure around the country in a lot of cases. That is even further more so why it is so important to have these spaces, because at home often it is not safe for people to talk about their identity, or they do not feel comfortable talking to people about their identity, or there aren't role models of the same in the same situation as them to look up to. I know that there has been questioning about why it is necessary, or if it is necessary, which I would of course say it is.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen explicit pushback.
I would like to add that everyone has an opinion on what should and shouldn't be in schools, parents included, and people who aren't parents, educators. Everyone has an opinion on what should and shouldn't be in the school environment, and I think that can sometimes go against what a lot of people believe. Mm-hmm. So there has been pushback. Fortunately, I haven't necessarily seen it in my own life, which is really nice, but I believe that students should go to school whole. Their whole being should be there so they can get the proper education. And LGBTQ plus youth, that's part of their identity, that's part of their whole person. So there should be a space in school for that, whether parents have pushback or not.
I think being able to turn up fully as your whole self in school is really important. I think it's important to your growth, and you need to be supported in who you are. In terms of I like the idea of looking at safe spaces at BCYF centres. I know we have an informal group in our neighbourhood that's an adult in the neighbourhood has sort of created a safe space at our house for folks, and we really would love to have a space in a community centre or whatever to do that, but we're not there yet. Just in terms of spreading the word, how do you the Gay Straight Alliance? I know when I came here first, my experience in high school was not a positive one, and when I came here and I went to my first gay pride parade and I saw the Gay Straight Alliance and all the schools supporting their young people, I was really moved by that, and I think I hope that can continue given the pleasant circumstances. But in terms of just finding adults to create that space, or not even just be there, how do you go about getting people to support you?
Generally for us, we use word of mouth. Having this sort of thing online publicly can be really scary and can sometimes be harmful to the people. So using word of mouth is our safest bet. And sort of going back to your other question earlier, I didn't get a chance to answer. having our space in a library allows for us to avoid that pushback from parents specifically, because when parents aren't accepting, the students can just say, I'm going to the library,
Yeah,
instead of saying, oh, I'm going to GSA after school.
yeah,
Sort of thing.
yeah. That makes sense. Well, thank you. Thank you for your leadership in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Councilor Pepin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to our panelists for being here today. Thank you for the advocacy work that you do. I remember I was part of it's called the Queer Neighborhood Council. I was in one of their meetings and we were doing a budget conversation, and one of the asks was to allocate some money for this type of space somewhere in this city. So I'm glad that we're still having this conversation and that there's still a lot of advocacy work behind it. So thank you for that. I remember that part of that conversation was one of the, I forget who it was, but one of the people speaking said that there's a really good example of a space at a library, like you mentioned in your speech. Makes me think about what we can do here in Boston. My question is even bigger than that, is if we were to have a space, what is your outreach like to the youth in the community? How do you guys follow up with people that would be interested in this type of service? Is it a regional effort? Is it a citywide effort? What is it like?
So I can speak mainly for Bagley because that's a lot of where my advocacy and all of the outreach I do is stemmed from. Bagley is a part of the Bagley network that's all across Massachusetts, so we do a lot of our outreach towards them. Here at Bagley in particular, I know for me, I'm one of the heart leaders, one of the peer leaders, so I do a lot of the health education and risk reduction services, and something we do is we offer a lot of our supplies outward. So another network will call us, another community center, someone who does it in the library, at their community college. They'll send us a request for supplies, like safe sex supplies and stuff like that, and we're able to offer it. So a lot of our outreach is done like that. A lot of our outreach is done on social media, which is really, really powerful. One of the things that Bagley has recently implemented was a steering committee where it is a group of peer leaders, and we are going just a step beyond focusing on what's strictly happening at our community center, and looking more at numbers, things as what communities that are underserved aren't coming to the space. How can we get them here? How can we keep them here? What can we offer them? That type of stuff is all super important, especially to a nonprofit like Bagley, to continue outreach, to keep it going. And I think a lot of these smaller and up and coming community centers and safe spaces for LGBT youth can learn a lot from it. And, even going back to the really basic outreaches of just networking is super duper important and really, really beneficial for things like this, especially even if it's in a school, in a high school, talking about it, super important.
Okay, I appreciate that. And when you think about the kind of services that you would like to see at these kind of locations, what are, I would say, the top three that you would think about? What are the priorities for you?
We have four particular pillars that we like to focus on, which are socialization, because above all, it is a social space. Advocacy, learning how to advocate for yourself, for others, speak out, speak up, and just in general, take up space. And then we have fulfillment, having a sense of pride in yourself, in who you are, knowing that you deserve to exist, to take up space, to be an important member of society. And then education, educating not only those who are attending this space, but also those around them who are maybe not nearly as accepting of these identities, being able to teach these youth how to create their own spaces elsewhere where there may not be a physical space, how to create in a social space, like an emotional space.
Okay. I thank you for sharing that. I know my time is up, but I do just want to say that I wouldn't even have any more questions just because I'm so supportive of things like this, of creating space where everyone just feels comfortable and safe and be able to be themselves. I'm a big believer in creating third spaces in our community where folks could just congregate and create community amongst each other. So thank you so much for the work you do. I look forward to being part of this conversation. So, thank you.
Thank you, Council Pepin. And I only have a couple of questions. I won't take up the 4 minutes, but thinking about how to set up our second and third panel and the folks and experts that we have coming on. You guys talked about how you did outreach for the space. You guys talked about what the physical space actually looked like, right? Pretty simple, basic, just chairs and a table's really all you need, maybe a couple snacks. You talked about, can you talk a little bit more about the type of programming you do? I know you talked about current events, other educational things. What are some of the things that you guys do now so the folks that come on to these next panels can begin to think about how that maybe incorporates into their space and how they can help that?
I can talk a little bit more about like what Bagley offers. So Bagley offers, first, Bagley is a youth-led, adult-supported program. It's the community space, the community center for that in particular. Bagley offers things such as stabilization and success, which is, you know, on Wednesdays, if you sign up, there's free 30-minute counseling, which is super important because that can't be accessible to all youth who need it. We also offer things like our sexual wellness clinic, which is a low to no barrier clinic that offers STI testing and health navigation for people who may need it, who can't do it on their own. We have things such as like supply closets that offer, you know, yes, gender affirming things, such as like binders and certain types of undergarments, but also our supply closets that offer things like towels, bedding, socks, clothing. We have a boutique that anyone can go and shop in that always has, you know, makeup and shoes and things like that. And Bagley also offers other supports that may not seem necessary, but is, such as like our YLA and our YLC, which is our youth leader advocacy. And that can be so important for things to set up our future, to set up, you know, for things that we may want to do later to continue advocacy for these things. So the fact that Bagley offers that is really important. It's not just a space, you know, where we sit down and chat and eat their very, very lovely snacks, which also happens, but it is a space where we continue the work that needs to be done, which, yes, sorry, is what Bagley, essentially, in short, what Bagley does.
No. Very helpful answer. Thank you. Did you want to add something?
When we don't have, Bagley is absolutely wonderful. But for those who cannot access the physical space, the community center in these smaller queer spaces, it's more of a, I would say, it's more of a scheduled ordeal in terms of everyone kind of arrives as they come in. Everyone is just socializing, talking. Eventually, usually we have introductions where everyone goes around, says their name, and maybe answers a question, just an icebreaker round. And then we usually socialize for a bit and then go into breakout rooms where if people wish to just stay and talk, or people want to work on homework, or people want to play a game, and then another, which is where the adult supervisor often comes in, and we go over the news, process the stories. What does this mean for our world? What does this mean for us as queer individuals? And having that space is so important to process that, since that is so often not talked about in school curriculum, at home for many, and outside of this kind of space. So having it's socializing, and then it's also a time to process and just have fun too.
Great. And is there, just a last quick question, is there a better, what are the times of this? If they, when they occur, when is this space open? When is it available? Weekdays, weekends, hours, et cetera?
Generally, it is after school. Ours in particular runs from about 3 to 5, though it can be shorter or longer as needed. Again, it does vary by community in terms of what the needs of the community are, since each group of youth is different. But I would say generally with conflicting activities on weekends for many students, after school tends to be the best time, and the day can vary, of course.
Gotcha. Well, thank you very much. We've also been joined by Council Mejia. Council Mejia, I don't know if you have any questions. I know you're just coming in at the end of this panel. We have 2 more panels after this, but if you'd like to ask any questions of our youth panel, now is the time. Thank you.
Y'all are lucky that I've been doing this work for a long time, so I can just jump right in. So good morning, everyone. Sorry that I was late. I was at another event. Really excited to be here. Back in the day, I used to work with Bagley. It was one of the teen centers that we used to fund, as well as Boston Glass. So I am no stranger to this conversation, and I understand the important work that you all are doing and how important it is for us to understand the work. And I'm curious if you could utilize your platform today to just fill in some gaps, right? If you're thinking about when we're seeing the anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric on the national scale and how it's trickling down to different spaces and places, what are some of the emerging themes that we should all be paying attention to, or at least start thinking of as it relates to programming for young people, whether it's in our Boston public schools or at community centers or even community health centers, right? Like all spaces and places in which people are even doing business in Boston. What can you share with us in terms of things that we should be mindful of and thinking about?
Yeah, I think a really common theme that seems to be coming out a lot more in these last few years with a lot of this anti-LGBT rhetoric is that kids are confused, or they don't know any better, or they're just not educated enough. And I think that can be a really detrimental and really harmful way of thinking, that these kids don't know anything, because then if you constantly are telling a kid you don't know what you're talking about, or it's just a phase, you'll get over it, that leads to a lot of harmful internalized things that isn't beneficial, and it tends to stop people from getting the services that they need. When something starts to become taboo, it can be really, really harmful to a person's mindset. And I think with this idea that kids don't know what they're talking about when it comes to this, I mean, now more than ever, people know more about LGBT because it's that much easier to look up things. You can grab your phone and Google anything. You can go on any platform and find out pretty much anything, for the better or for the worse. So I think it's really important to note that kids know a lot more than what you think they might, and to listen to them. Really important things, that are on the up for change are typically youth-led, because they're so strong and they are our next leaders, so they know more than what you might think.
Yeah, thank you.
But also, as an adult who cares about these people, oftentimes, as you said, there's a lot of negative views from the adults, but as an adult with a positive view of this sort of topic, you can sort of provide that, making sure they feel safe and that they know that you are there for them at all times, no matter what, even if they make mistakes, even if they cause problems, but addressing that in a way that they know that you always will care about them is very important, I think.
Just providing a space, as Oliver said, for youth to explore, even in times of their lives that aren't necessarily permanent, to experiment, to provide a place where they can experiment with who they are as a person, to try on different parts of themselves, and to just overall make them feel safe, loved, accepted, wanted, and needed as part of the community.
I heard my time was up. Was that, what, how many, oh, let me find out. We got,
Hey, get here on time.
that's okay. I will yield 4 minutes. Okay. I'll get you the next round.
This panel, guys, you are excellent advocates. You are educated, and thank you for sharing that education and making this body wiser on this topic as well. And you are all now excused, and you're welcome to stay, or if you have to go back to school, please go back to school. But thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, counselors.
We'd now like to invite the second panel down to the floor. We have Dr. Fernando Salinas Quiroz from Transformative Schools, Harvard, Sogi, and Tufts University, as well as Curtis Santos from Boston Lesbi Urban Foundation, Tyler Vashon from Milton Public Library, Michelle Weiner from Bagley, and Julian Sorrell Nilsson of Boston Glass. Thank you all and welcome. I'm not sure, I don't believe, there's no presentation from this panel as well, right? We'll just, is there any, would anybody like to make just an opening remark or two, or would we can get right into statements? I just don't know if you guys feel the need to say something up front, or we can go right into our questions.
I do have a 5-minute speech. I thought that was I was supposed to do. Is that okay?
No, this
it's
is
not a presentation, but I mean I have something.
No,
written
if you
down.
have something prepared, this is, and then we will react to that.
I appreciate it.
But yeah, but if you guys could all say, try and keep it as quick as you can. Yeah, you guys can all say an opening statement,
Right.
and then we'll go
No,
through.
I practiced this 4 minutes and a half.
Yeah. No, please.
Good.
Please introduce yourself. All of you can
Sure.
introduce yourself, and then do your opening statement, then we'll go into questions.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, I worked on weekends, so I should read it. Good morning, councilors. Good morning, all present. My name is Fernando Salinas Quiroz. They, them pronouns. Ele, ello. I am professor at Tufts University and director of research of Transformative Schools, TFS. I stand before you today not only as a trans scholar, but as someone who envisions a Boston where every LGBTQ plus youth can thrive and not just survive. Let's be clear. The urgency of this issue cannot be overstated. Across the U.S., anti-trans legislation has reached unprecedented levels, with over 600 bills introduced this year alone. These attacks are devastating. 86% of trans and non-binary youth say such bills harm their mental health, and nearly half of them have considered suicide. For racialized students, these struggles are compounded by systemic racism and discrimination. Schools founded on hierarchical norms enforcing the gender binary, whiteness, and Christian nationalism were not built with this youth in mind. In fact, they were designed to erase our existence. But we know there is another way forward. My research has established foundational criteria for understanding non-binary gender identification, including the first global study examining how young 3 to 8-year-old non-binary children understand their gender identity. Our findings demonstrate how parents advocate for their non-binary children across educational, healthcare, and community settings. At TFS, we've built upon this research to reimagine education by centering trans and BIPOC joy and liberation. We operate a first-of-its-kind, trans-centered after-school program in New York City, where trans students find a space designed specifically for them. Here, Trans teachers teach trans kids, serving as vital role models and mentors who affirm and inspire them. This space fosters identity exploration, academic rigor, and community building. Students just don't feel safe here. They are free to dream, to connect, and to grow. One student shared, and I am quoting, "If I had gone to a school like this sooner, I would have been more gentle and accepting of myself." End of the quote. This is the power of affirming spaces where young people feel seen. We empower youth through Youth Participatory Action Research, YPAR, positioning trans students as decision makers in their own education. By placing students in leadership roles, we shift the power dynamic. Actually, I wasn't comfortable about being here. They should be here instead and keep teaching us so much. We don't just teach them how to navigate oppressive systems. We equip them to challenge and transform those systems. Education becomes a collaborative, liberatory process. Boston has the chance to lead the nation in creating affirming, transformative spaces for LGBTQ+ youth. Here's how. 1, fund community-led initiatives. Allocate resources specifically to trans-led center organizations whose programs provide identity-affirming spaces and mentorship that can change lives. 2, empower trans voices. Adopt participatory models like YPAR that place youth at the center of the decision-making processes. 3, transform public spaces. Reimagine, as we've just learned with amazing recommendations, libraries, community centers, and parks as hubs for LGBTQ+ connection, creativity, and joy. These steps are not optional. They are life-saving interventions. When trans youth have access to affirming environments, we see measurable improvements in their mental health, academic performance, and social emotional skills. But most importantly, I'm done with suicidality and horrible bullying. We need to switch the script and to start talking about joy. Let us move beyond inclusion and acceptance toward liberation and revolution. Together, we can make Boston a national leader in dismantling oppressive systems and creating transformative change. Thank you all.
Thank you. We'll just go right down the line.
Oh, sure. Thank you. My name is Tyler Vachon. I'm the teen librarian over at Milton Public Library. I won't repeat what two of my wonderful students have already shared about our career space program here, but Oliver and Alon helped us get this off the ground. The main thing I wanted to kind of share and reiterate here with folks is just the relatively light lift materially that a program like this can be. They're lightweight, very adaptable programs that can work in a variety of youth-serving contexts. Realistically, anywhere that you have youth gathering, you have queer youth gathering, and it's easy to develop services that can meet their needs. We've heard a lot of kind of harrowing statistics about the mental health crises that our queer youth are facing. One of the things that I always try to point out when we're having these conversations is the broad consensus from anywhere from the Human Rights Campaign's 2023 LGBTQ+ youth report to the Journal of Adolescent Health, that broad social support for these students changes numbers around anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation drastically. Respect for their identities in even one context outside of their own peer group has reportedly yielded a 29% decrease in suicidal ideation and a 56% decrease in suicidal behavior among queer youth. There are just some very huge material impacts you can make in the lives of students just by creating spaces for them to spend recreational time authentically. The trickier component than the kind of material lift required to get these programs off the ground, I think, ends up being around policy and soft skills at the hosting institutions. You need to, it's important for public-facing staff and management to be ready for the kinds of questions and issues that may arise when creating these spaces for queer youth. Ultimately inviting queer youth into our organizations come with the obligation to protect these students' safety and dignity. And so having early conversations around, our staff fluent in common social perils facing queer youth? Can they recognize misgendering and dead naming? Do acceptable use and conduct policies of your organization support protecting students against these things? Can you create or organize the space in such a way that attendants are not placing themselves in a fishbowl, where it becomes very easily publicly available to find out where all the queer kids are so you can go bully them or harass them? And are staff ready to respectfully navigate attendance, and youth who may be becoming increasingly involved in your organization and are ready to navigate conversations around as they become more comfortable with you? You may learn that they go by a different name or use different pronouns, and being able to adapt to these things without putting a lot of additional work on them to, have to continue to walk you through all of this. Ultimately, I'm happy to answer questions about the program. A lot of my main talking points were already covered by my students, so thank you all.
Thank you.
Good morning, Curtis Santos, he, him, his pronouns, Executive Director of Boston LGBTQ Urban Foundation. Our mission is to increase the possibilities of opportunities within the BIPOC community, specifically LGBTQ individuals within the Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan areas. I'm here before you to stand on the foundation of other young folks who I work with in the work who don't feel like they have inclusivity around space and community and safe spaces. And so my goal is to hopefully advocate for those young people who are not here today and before you to make sure that their voices are heard, but mostly that we're creating safe spaces within the urban communities for our BIPOC community individuals.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to the council. My name is Michelle Wiener. I use pronouns like she and her, and I am Bagley's Director of Program Development and Impact. So I'm here to speak on behalf of Bagley, but I also want to take a moment to just highlight the work of many of our partner organizations. I know my colleague from Boston Glass is here, and other organizations like Boston Glass, like the Theater Project, like the Mass Commission on LGBTQ Youth's Safe Schools program, all organizations and programs that have been doing this work here in Boston to create safe spaces for LGBTQ plus youth, both in and outside of schools, for years and in many cases for decades. So I want to take a moment to highlight all of those organizations and the robust work that lays the foundations for us to grow into the future. Bagley was founded in 1980. We are approaching our 45-year anniversary by and for LGBTQ plus young people. They were looking for many of the same things our young people are looking for today. Safe and supportive spaces, opportunities to be with peers, to share about their identity, and to learn from and collaborate with supportive adults. Today, we are fortunate enough to have a 10,000 square foot community center right here in downtown Boston. It is a 3-minute walk from where we are right now. We would love to invite council members, our colleagues, to come see our center, come see the work that we are doing, and come visit the sites of our partner organizations as well. We do all of this work in collaboration. Bagley supports LGBTQ youth, primarily ages 25 and under, although our clinic services go up to ages 29. And we are a complement to the work that is done by GSAs in schools. We are a third space for young people to spend time in, to access community, and to access services and resources. We offer 3 different programs, which offer a suite of different resources. That includes our health and wellness program, which provides opportunities for young people to build community and supportive relationships, and to take care of their physical health, including accessing our free clinic. We provide our stabilization and success program, which offers free behavioral health. So that is drop-in therapy, short-term therapy, and other therapeutic services, as well as opportunities and resources for youth experiencing homelessness. The majority of the majority of unaccompanied homeless youth in this state are LGBTQ. And we see many of those young people at Bagley looking for a space that is both able to meet their concrete needs for direct aid, as well as be supportive and affirming of their identities. And then as some of our youth leaders talked on the previous panel, we also offer our youth leadership and advocacy program, which includes, among other things, our youth leadership committee, which works to run everything that we do. We are a youth-led, adult-supported organization, and everything that we do is in partnership with youth is in response to the needs of the community and is helping to meet what is both existing and emerging needs, including what we recognize to be the likely emerging need of young people coming to Massachusetts from other states seeking safety and resources that they cannot find in their communities of origin. So we are very excited to be here and excited to talk about the work that we do, both here in Boston, and we do also support work statewide. We run statewide events, including Massachusetts Youth Pride, which will actually be right here on City Council Plaza this coming spring. And we support, I know Levi mentioned on the previous panel, the AGLI Network, which is almost 35 years old. It is a group of 15 LGBTQ plus youth organizations and groups all over Massachusetts. We have sites in Western Mass, in Pittsfield, in Springfield, in Worcester, on the Cape, all doing this work in various ways outside of school, all community-based. Some of them are full nonprofits like Bagley with their own physical community centers. Some are volunteer-led, using some of the resources the previous panel talked about, like libraries or school spaces. But all of them are helping to make sure that there is a safety net for young people, not just here in Boston, but across the Commonwealth.
Great, thank you so much. There is one panelist that we have through Zoom. You may go. I think we can hear you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for allowing me to participate via Zoom. Hello, everyone. My name is Julian Nilsson. My pronouns are they, he, she. I am the program director at Boston Glass, which serves queer and trans youth of color ages 13 through 24 in the Boston metro area. We have a physical drop-in space located in Jamaica Plain, which is the center of our service model. We provide various clinical services through that drop-in space, such as HIV, STI testing, and counseling, as well as PrEP referrals. We provide free outpatient therapy through our staff of all queer and POC behavioral health clinicians, and we provide free legal consultations and services with our partnership through the Health Law Institute, and we also have weekly programming, support groups, and community events in our physical drop-in space. The program itself has existed since 1995. We have historically had very strong ties to the local ballroom community in Boston and in greater New England. When I say ballroom, I don't mean like the waltz. If you have ever seen FX series Pose or Madonna's Vogue video, the dance style voguing featured in that video comes from the community that I am referencing. And the ballroom community has traditionally been a safe space for queer and trans people of color, specifically from the Black and Latinx community since the late 70s and early 80s. Our program throws kiki balls in the local scene and provides support for facilitating events in the scene as a means of providing outreach and services to these traditionally underserved populations. I wanted to use most of my time today to talk about some highlights in terms of areas where there are gaps in services and funding that could have a greater impact on queer and trans youth across the city. One such area is related to the increasing rates of housing insecurity and homelessness experienced by queer and trans youth, as other panelists have mentioned, especially queer and trans youth of color. The increasing cost of living in the city, more complicated and nuanced issues regarding family dynamics, as well as increased stigma and scrutiny being placed on trans folk by the national discourse on identity politics are all contributing factors into this increase. And unfortunately, there are very few youth shelters available in the city, and even fewer that are affirming for queer and trans people. So much of the existing funding available for rental assistance and housing advocacy focuses specifically on people living with HIV or youth who live in specific area codes or attend certain schools. And so the availability of more funding to support rental assistance and housing advocacy would be a great boon to all providers who serve this community and to queer and trans youth across the city in general. Another gap in services and funding is related to the rapidly increasing need for therapeutic services across the country and here in Boston. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, and especially with this new administration entering into office, queer and trans youth of color are reaching out in much greater numbers for therapeutic services, and there are simply not enough providers to support the increasing need. Our outpatient therapeutic services are entirely grant funded, and our wait list continues to grow every week. And so having more funding to hire additional clinicians would mean that we could provide more low barrier therapeutic services to more youth. And this would help to address a variety of other health concerns facing queer and trans youth, such as higher risk for suicidality and substance use disorders. And finally, I wanted to mention the need for additional funding to support health navigation services for queer and trans youth. Currently, funding through the Department of Public Health supports short-term health navigation services, but in practice, most clients need a dedicated health advocate to help them navigate the very confusing and often off-putting network of public health services. And the process of applying for aid through these various services is often very slow and frustrating. And the youth that are accessing them are often facing very immediate and potentially dangerous health concerns, like I mentioned previously. And so the need to have advocates who they trust and who look like them and who have similar experiences as them is more prevalent than ever to keep them engaged in these systems so that they can have higher likelihood of success in accessing the services that are available. And I want to also add that the availability of emergency funding to help pay for things like legal fees, hotel stays, medical bills, gender-affirming items like wigs, clothes, binders, packers, etc., would all have an even greater impact on these services and on the youth that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to note that we've also been joined by Council President Louis Jen and City Council at Large Erin Murphy. They're with us here today. Now that we have the larger panel, I'll start with the lead sponsor for questions, and then we'll go order of arrival after that. Councilor Santana, you have 4 minutes on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our panelists for being here. I'll jump right in. My first question is for both Dr. Fernando Salinas Quiros, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name, and to Curtis Santos. I really care about our LGBTQ plus community, and I really believe in community spaces. And one thing that, as an at-large city councilor and going in every neighborhood into these spaces, one thing that I see lacking is our Black and Brown, our Latinx, youth, and I mean, not just youth, but just people in general in these spaces, right? And I think I really wanted to be, our office is very intentional about how we approach this work, and would like to hear from both of you in terms of, what can we do better to serve our Black and Brown and our BIPOC community and our BIPOC youth. Right there are LGBTQ people that are Black and Brown and Hispanic. I just want to know how we as the City of Boston can be more intentional about creating that space for them.
I don't mind starting. Thank you for the question. I think that going back to what Julian said, reflectiveness, right? Culturally reflectiveness, creating spaces within urban communities that they feel safe. I know that going from Roxbury, Dorchester to downtown might be hard for some BIPOC individuals. Transportation might be an issue. So really centralizing community hubs or safe zones for LGBTQIA BIPOC individuals is crucial. I think of how the city is creating a new community center right in Grove Hall. All right, the new Grove Hall Community Center. Creating an infrastructure like that to really bring a safe haven to BIPOC LGBTQ individuals.
And just to follow, so we talk about creating safe spaces, right? And I think we all agree. What does that safe place look like for our Black and Brown?
Housing support, right? Creating housing support. So Blue, we do a lot of things. We do mentorship, which we actually have a BIPOC mentorship program that was reflective of individuals that we serve. Housing support, cooking classes. We do cooking classes showing folks how to cook with $25 or less, right? It's a hard time. It's hard times for some folks. We work with reentry folks, right? Making sure that when folks are coming home from out of prison, they have access to care. They have linkage to care, linkage to someone who can support them outside of just the normal day-to-day functioning. So just creating more intentional services provisions that can support them and actually do linkage to care supports.
Thank you.
I would just add the fact of thinking about terminology that sometimes we in academia sound like, oh, why are you keep doing this? But for example, this is why I avoid using safe spaces. We don't know what's happening from the moment the person leaves their house to they arrive to our center. So I think we can aim to have safer, right, or safe enough spaces. That's one thing. And the other one that I've been hearing, between lines, is the idea of allies. And I think that's important, but it makes it about you. And I think you third person, right? And I think we can talk about acting in allyship, but it's not about you, it's about us. So I do think that it's important for all of these centers, specifically for those of us who are BIPOC, to have those positions of power. I'm ultra privileged, one of the few folks of color that works in my department at Tufts University, so fancy, right? So, but very few of us, get there. And I think the big problem is why we're not hiring and why we are also expelling, is that a word? Anyway, throwing away the teachers, trans teachers of the profession. And I think that's something that we should be thinking about. Yep.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both. Again, thank you to our panelists for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Santana. Councilor Weber.
Thank you. Yep. I guess I'll start with Michelle and Julian. In terms of drop-in spaces, what type of, how many people come to your spaces? What kind of staffing do you need? And I guess the third part is what sort of outreach do you use to get the word out? I guess Michelle, if you want to start.
Yeah, thank you. So we are open right now. Bagley's Community Center is open Monday through Friday from 2 p.m. until early evening. One of the things we'd love to be able to do is expand our hours, including to Saturdays. We know that's an ask for our community, from the community. It's something we just don't have the resources to do right now. So it is staffed by a combination of full-time staff, so trained youth development professionals who work on our programs team, and we have adult advisors who are trained volunteers from the community who help to provide additional support. Almost every evening we also have structured programming, a lot of which is led by our peer leaders. And so they are often another person in the space to welcome people, give them a tour, introduce them to Bagley. Depending on the evening, we see anywhere from 10 to 40 young people a night. Certain evenings have more. Wednesdays and Fridays tend to be a little bit busier. Mondays tend to be a little bit quieter as people are starting their weeks off. We find that when we have larger events or structured programming that we see more folks coming in. And then we also have people coming in throughout the day, less for drop-in, but more to access a specific service. So they might come into the space, come downstairs, and go primarily to the clinic, or pivot and go primarily to one of our therapy rooms. We serve over 10,000 youth every year at the community center, and then more throughout the state. Again, the goal is always to be thinking about how we expand. I know my colleagues have identified a couple of areas where there's always need for more. Similarly, our therapy waiting list is always longer than we are able to fulfill. We also know that youth are coming out younger and younger. We have some partner sites in other parts of the state who have done really excellent programming with middle school and even a little bit younger. And similarly is something we would love to be able to expand into, particularly because one of the good things is that with the growth of the GSA movement, the Gender and Sexuality Alliances at school, more and more high school aged youth have a space, at least a space, that they feel comfortable in. But GSAs are still a lot less prevalent at the middle school level, and those young people in particular are looking for spaces to congregate. Although again, the staffing needs, the sort of logistics of a drop-in versus a more structured space shift as we go younger.
Okay, and Julian, I don't know if what kind of outreach do you do?
So for us, we utilize like various methods. We use social media. We have recently done like a geosocial ad campaign on Grindr to promote our testing and prep referral services. We've utilized billboards. We've utilized an MBTA ad campaign. So we really tried to get, very creative in terms of the ways we bring youth into the space and also just spread the word about our services. I would say probably the biggest way though that we do outreach is we hit the streets, we'll flyer, we'll talk with people directly at train stations. And then there's also like our community events. So as I was mentioning in my opening statement, we're very closely related to the ballroom scene here in Boston. And so we throw kiki balls in the local scene. And so through word of mouth and through those events, we often bring in a lot of new youth. I would say that, at a typical ball, there could be 50 to 100 people that may come. In terms of the drop-in space itself, we are open Monday through Friday as well, from 1 to 6, Monday through Thursday, and from 1 to 5 on Friday. I would say that on, a Monday or a Tuesday, we could see 20 people hanging out in the space, and then throughout the rest of the week, it could vary depending on what programming is happening. And so we're always looking, of course, to expand that and to have more youth in the space, to have more time and more opportunities to throw events in the community. And I would say that we rely heavily on our youth, our peer leaders. We also hire peer leaders like Bagley does to help lead and facilitate our various programming in the space and also to help us with our outreach. And we rely heavily on them to also spread the word for us too amongst the community, since it's much more effective to utilize clients and community members themselves to bring in their friends and their networks into the space.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Weber. Councilor Braden?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. I've met some folks from Bagley we had a youth organised health fair at the Walk Square YMCA, and it was really wonderful to see the youth organising their own event, and then to have such a wide range of organisations like yours present to help educate and inform folks. I'm just wondering about maybe the need for more outside of school spaces, because I think the environment, the legal structure, the legal environment around schools and what we're going to be able to do and not do in schools is going to tighten significantly, I think. What's your thoughts about how we might, go after, create more safe spaces outside of a school building, a school's structure? Any thoughts? No. You're a librarian, maybe you could...
I was waiting to see if anyone jumped in. I'm happy to... I'll always advocate for libraries for those types of spaces. They're places where students tend to be congregating anyway.
Yeah.
A lot of libraries in the area may already have teen advisory boards, which are a way of creating like peer-led library programs. That's actually how Queer Space started at our library, was tab members. Oliver's shared that he was one of them. Stated the need for this program and a desire to see it happen. But librarians are also people who are hopefully positioned in their community with additional contacts, like they know other youth centers, interfaith organizations, places with these rooms that we could get into if the library itself doesn't have the space for it. But I do think any community organization that has teens regularly meeting at it already is probably the perfect place to start. All the better if, as we were hearing earlier, like a library, there's a billion reasons why a student could be there. So if they're living at home and closeted, it may be easier for them to get to a library under the pretense of going to the library and then be able to benefit from a space like this.
Yeah, we really love our libraries for that reason. And also in terms of access to services, you said that there's a wait list for mental health counselling at Bagley. Are there other referral spaces that you can refer? Obviously, if you're working with younger students, they may need parental involvement, and that makes it very tricky sometimes if the parents are not supportive. Can you speak to those sort of challenges?
Yeah, so yes to everything that you said, yes. So Bagley is able to offer we're able to offer drop-in therapy and short-term therapy, and we also offer a couple of therapeutic groups, but those are our two main behavioral health services. And the thing that is unique and uniquely beneficial to young people, particularly as you suggested, LGBTQ plus youth who are not comfortable being out to their parents, either because they're as minors or as young adults who are still on a parent's health insurance, is that our behavioral health services are free. There's no insurance needed. There's no insurance asked for. So in terms of being able to refer to a service that parallels that exactly, that is also free, that is also no insurance required, we certainly make referrals between us and Boston Glass, but I think we are both very often in the same position of having more need than there are resources. There are certainly other places that we are able to make referrals to, often though those are then paid. I think the other big challenge is finding culturally competent providers. I know some of my colleagues have talked about just the critical importance of providers that share the identities of young people who are LGBTQ culturally competent, who are supportive and able to support the needs of trans youth and queer and trans youth of color. And that can be particularly challenging. And frankly, I think something we've come up against is that even when there are resources to bring more folks onto the team, there isn't yet a strong pipeline socially of folks coming out of graduate therapy, social work programs who are competent in those areas, that there isn't even necessarily a large pool of candidates to just yet to draw from. So anything also that helps build that pool of candidates up down the road will be more providers available eventually to be able to provide not just services, but really good services.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Pippen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the panelists for being here. It was great to hear testimonies and just get a glimpse of your expertise in this area. My question is about your partnership with other organizations and institutions in the city, maybe specifically to both of you. What is your relationship like with the schools in our city? What kind of outreach do you do to connect with them? I know, to Councilor Braden's point, it's probably tough to provide services out to school, but what is the pipeline like to get students to know that you exist as a resource? And two, you were talking about referrals. And it immediately made me think about a neighborhood health center. What is your relationship like with the hospitals? Obviously, Boston's known for amazing medical system, but what do you have a relationship with them? Is there a way for a pediatrician or someone that, takes care of the health of the young adult to refer them to you?
Yeah, so I can start, and I know Boston Glass as well. So in terms of our relationship with the schools, so we work closely with the Mass Commission on LGBTQ youth in general, but in particular their Safe Schools program, which is our statewide network for supporting GSAs. So we work both to co-host events and co-advertise opportunities, but also to make use of those, helping youth make transitions between those two spaces. If they come to Bagley, getting them connected with a school-based GSA, and vice versa. If they're starting at their school, getting them connected to any of our community partner opportunities. We also have, just as a very specific note, we have a mailing list specifically for GSAs and for both educators and students that goes out with events particularly targeted towards that age group. In terms of partnerships with and referrals with some of our hospitals, we do have relationships with a number of hospitals in the area, both through grants and through direct relationships. We work closely with MGH, Mass General. One evening or one day a week, we have a nurse from MGH who comes to our clinic and is actually able to provide prescriptions for HIV treatment right on site. Otherwise, we make direct referrals to them. Usually those young people, once we make that referral, are seen and get that script within 24 hours, which, as we all know from navigating our healthcare system, is faster than normal. And then similarly have relationships with a number of community centers to continue just filling in those gaps around what services are needed.
I echo everything that she said. I think we do have a partnership with the Mass LGBTQ Youth Commission, which is really one of our great partners. And then also our deputy director work within the school system at Brighton High School specifically in a GSA program, in which she does a lot of referrals through that particular program. And then also, as far as partnerships with health centers, we do partner with a lot of health centers around health equity and making sure that folks have access to care. And so we do work with MGB. We do a lot of work with Fenway Health, advancing health equity around COVID-19, MPOX, and things like that. But also we're really getting intentional around how do we connect other community health centers with LGBTQ queer identities and how do they serve that population within the institution to make sure that it's very inclusive for everyone to come to the institution to be serviced.
Yeah, that's I'm really happy to know that there is already some sort of a standing relationship. And thinking about what hospitals, communities that I represent Rosnell, Hyde Park, Mattapan, that region. I know that there's a lack of health centers.
I was going to say that's one of the things that we noticed there. It's a lack of health centers. So to get folks coming from that area to like VMC and those other community health centers is really hard.
Yeah, so that's why I was asking that question, to see what is the existing ones, to see where people are how can people go to them. So I would love to, if you have any information, please send that over.
We also offer folks free rides to get to the health centers too, right? If they have some deficiencies in getting to the health center, we'll say, here go a Lyft voucher, here go an Uber voucher to get you to the health center as well. So it's all about them reaching out and getting access to those services.
Gotcha. Councilor Pepin, I apologize, I forgot to start the time for you.
That's okay.
But if you have one more question.
That was
all right, no good.
Thank you all for the work you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Councilor Mejia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So just going to dive right in. Thank you for all your work. Really do appreciate everything that you all shared with us thus far. Since I only have 4 minutes, I have 4 questions, a minute each, okay? Don't take up too much time because I will put a buzzer on you. And I'm going to just spit them all out and you all can figure out who's going to answer them. One is around training for LGBTQ affirming spaces. I'm curious about what training are you doing with other organizations, providers, health centers, community centers, because I believe in all spaces and places, we need to make sure that we're providing training and education, not just in spaces that we're operating in. So curious what that looks like, if anything. Anyone could talk about that. Julian, I was an honorary member of the House of Revlon. When I lived in New York, I worked at the Hedrick Martin Institute, the home of the Harvey Milk School. And while I was there, I did a lot of work with young people. And the goal was to really help people understand that we were doing an HIV and AIDS awareness initiative. And for me, it was really important for young people to realize that HIV wasn't about who you did, but what you did that put you at risk. And so we were trying to create spaces for all orientations to be in community with each other, specifically in areas like Manhattan, Bronx, and Brooklyn, in high areas where there were a lot of young people of color. And I'm just curious in terms of like working on doing more integrated programming, what that looks like for you all within the house, with the ballroom scene. I think that there's lots of opportunities in the art space to do more integrated programming with teen empowerment and other organizations that you all potentially all could be collaborating with. So would love to hear what that looks like if there's any opportunities there. And if it exists, great. And if not, let's talk about how we can do that. And then I really love your asset-based framing because what I've seen here in the nonprofit sector in particular is that we always lead with our deficits. Oh, vulnerable communities, but we're not vulnerable, we're resilient, right?
We are vulnerable. We've been vulnerable.
Exactly.
It sounds like we're English, but we've vulnerable.
Yeah.
We've been harmed.
That's right. So that's about claiming the story and the narrative.
Yep.
And I think that we here on the council and even providers, we need to start really thinking about how we position and how we talk about people who are resilient, because there is strength in that struggle. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that could look like even in policy, because I think that we have to really start thinking about how we position these conversations in ways that lead with those assets and not fall victim to the stereotypical plight. So I'd love you all to talk about that. Thank you.
I can start off with the training, I don't mind. Boston LGBTQ Urban Foundation, we offer trainings to several different entities, one being Children's Services of Roxbury, another being Project Right, and then also we offer trainings within our community setting. We offer parents and guardians to come on trainings with us and learn about pronouns, learning about inclusivity, learning about making environments more friendly, queer friendly, understanding that when folks come into your building or your business, there's no signs that reflect them. They might not feel included in society. And so we do a lot of trainings, and I think that as we advance our trainings, we're looking to do more work with HRC and making sure that they're coming into the fold of having bigger, larger conversations with us. But also we're working with Pride in the Workplace on making sure that queer folks are coming into conversations on understanding their rights in the workplace and understanding their dignity in the workplace and not feeling like they have to default to being devalued in the workplace. So we're doing a lot of work with Pride in the Workplace as well.
To answer your question about integrating services in the ballroom scene and their relation to HIV prevention work, it's so exciting to hear that you were involved with the House of Revlon. And actually, the Kiki scene in ballroom started as a grassroots way of addressing HIV prevention in the community. And we have, as an organization, really tried to keep that, the history of that and the tradition of that going. Right now, we just recently had a PrEP themed ball that was funded through the MOLA office. And we used that as an opportunity to provide PrEP referrals to clients that came to the ball and to also just provide education and messaging about HIV. And we also are currently working on organizing a dinner and kind of panel discussion with all of the ballroom mothers and fathers across New England and Boston to address issues of substance use in the community. So we are really trying to create that momentum and trying to create that integration between the ballroom community and the leaders in the ballroom community, as well as service providers in the city, to make a stronger network in a way of kind of addressing this community in a way that feels more culturally relative to them and helps them feel more excited and more safe to engage in these services and to hear this messaging. So that's absolutely one of the goals of our program and something that we've been working on actively.
Thank you very much. Council President Louis Jen? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have something?
Real fast?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Well, I'm not an expert on policy, but definitely I know that policy uses research. And it has to do with what kind of research we do and what kind of questions we ask and the results that we produce. So instead of giving me, is it hard to get to the hospital? Yes, it is. If you ask me what is the most rewarding thing about having a non-binary child, boom. If you start doing YPAR, for example, again, I struggled coming here when Michael invited me. I was like, I don't think I should be here. And of course, we have all have some to add. But again, who should be hearing from them? We are serving them, and they should be co-constructing that beyond this 5 minutes rush thing that we're doing. We should have a task force, and we should be working on regular basis. But so yes, I think research, we are co-responsible of this because it's the kind of research we've been doing. And usually, there's a phrase that I love. I think it's from TransHub, is research has been done to us rather than with us. So let's also, this brings joy, this change the narrative, and I think we're heading into that direction. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Council President Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Councilor Santana for holding this very important hearing. A number of you highlighted the importance of third spaces, and I think that's what this is all about, those spaces outside of home and outside of work that can be places. And I know that we're talking about this in the context of our LGBTQ plus youth, but third spaces are so important for everyone, especially in this time of just so much division and lack of places that are low barrier entry where you can go and really commune with folks, but the importance of it for this work. And I just want to highlight you, Curtis, because I think you do a really good job of disrupting spaces that may be hostile or not welcoming or neutral, and you take them over. I'm thinking about that event that we did in Dorchester and the panel and how beautiful it was to be in a space and in a neighborhood where maybe folks aren't always comfortable of queer folks occupying and taking that space. And you do that so beautifully for our Black and brown folks here in the city of Boston. So I just wanted to salute you for that, because that's really important. And there's also a really, and I know this is about youth, but there's an intergenerational nature that I think is really beautiful as well, especially what the elders can teach the young people, right? The way that, the White House is celebrating World AIDS Day. Elders who grew up in that fear of what it meant to be stigmatized. So there's so much cross-learning to do. We are here joined by our wonderful MOLA, and they've done really great work with the Beyond Pride mini grants, because let's face it, I think a lot of what we're talking about is like great ideas and how do we fund it and support it. Wondering what interaction you all have had with the Pride mini grants, if any, and any feedback you have for us on how it is or isn't working.
I don't mind starting. I don't know. Thank you for the question. For the Pride, Beyond Pride Mini Grant, we used it for, we are the curators, I wouldn't say curators, but we re-established Boston Black Pride here in the city of Boston when it was stolen from us. And I think that with the with the Pride Mini Grants, Beyond Pride Mini Grants, we used that actual funding to funnel money to help support Black Pride Boston. And I think that Black Pride is such a significant movement across the nation. I think that here in the city of Boston, it's underfunded, totally underfunded. And when I met with the original Pride leaders around Black Pride, they stated they was only getting $2,000 to run a Black Pride. So that doesn't even mitigate the visibility around Black Pride. When we started curating space for Black Pride, we sat down with leaders, queer leaders, and said, what do you want for Black Pride? They said, we don't even know Black Pride exists here in the city of Boston until we started the movement again. And so I think funding it holistically, but not underfunding it, because if you think about it nationally, it's a huge movement in different cities. And I think Boston, predominantly, we're like almost like the 5th city with the most populated LGBTQ individuals here in the city. And so I think that we have to be mindful of how folks are taking up space, but what are we doing to cultivate culture within that space that they're taking up?
Thank you so much, Curtis. And I ask that again because that's our bailiwick here. One of the things we can do, funding and working alongside MOLA. I know they care about it deeply, and if they had unlimited pools, this is something we would put more money to. Wondering what the scope, the landscape of funding looks like now, what the fear of. Is there fear of funding for issues that matter most to our queer community? Thinking also about what, Michelle, you mentioned, is there preparation being done for folks who may find safety and safe harbor in Massachusetts? Just would love to hear a little about what you all are thinking about in terms of your work, given the national climate and landscape of fear and maybe hesitation to be as supportive, especially when we're talking about our trans community general when it comes to funding and support.
Yeah, thank you for this question. So Bagley, we are very fortunate to receive funding from the state, from the Department of Public Health, from the city, from the mayor's office. Incredible sources of funding that help support our work, in addition to private foundation giving. And as you suggest, if there are changes at a federal level that impact the money coming to the state and therefore are coming to the city, that is likely to lead to additional cuts to that funding. Within private giving, we know that private giving is way down from what it has been in recent years. So while we are very fortunate to be okay, there is a lot of anxiety about what comes next and a lot of uncertainty, with the acknowledgement that we could be lucky and things are okay, or some really worst case scenarios could happen. So I think that is a consideration, and I think it is particularly a consideration, as you mentioned, with the expectation that there will be more, particularly young trans kids and their families coming to the state. I know for the families and children who have started coming already, often are coming first to Boston and are finding that they simply can't afford to live here. They can't afford housing, they can't find employment, they can't afford the cost of living. and they are going into other parts of the state where there may or may not be as many resources. So I think it was one of my colleagues mentioned earlier, around, in addition to things that are focused on LGBTQ youth and the spaces for them, it is also all of the things like housing, like access to mental health services that are going to allow people to come here and actually be able to live and thrive here.
Thank you. I forgot to start your time, but your 4 minutes is up, Council President. I apologize. I get distracted. I'd also like to acknowledge we're joined by Councilor Worrell as well, but up next we have Councilor Erin Murphy.
Thank you. Thank you, Henry, Councilor Santana, for bringing this forward and holding this today. And a few things, when you were sharing about, the history and the organizations you work with, thank you for reminding us, right, that you've been around for decades. This isn't a new thing, and you've been doing the work for a very long time. So that's important. And Curtis, I do like your shirt, spoke. And Michael Dowling has definitely held space for decades also, starting back, with the AIDS epidemic and then the suicide wave in South Boston, and definitely is a model, I think, in the city of where, you can look to. Because one of my questions, and I think, you all can answer this nicely, but someone like Michael definitely could answer it. What stands out to all of you as the biggest differences between safe spaces for, the LGBTQ community compared to the spaces we already have? And, if there was a checklist, like what would you want to see on that checklist that you would want to see in these spaces?
I think for me, the first thing that's coming to my mind is transphobia and homophobia, right? I think that spaces today, transphobia and homophobia could be so disguised, but it's all about the treatment. And I think that a lot of our young people might not understand that language or that shared responsibility of understanding how they're being mistreated. And so I think that when we think of creating community spaces for youth in a safe space, I think it's the same autonomy of bringing the same services, but more inclusive, being more inclusive, and them feeling like they have a home to come to, them feeling like they can walk into the space, they're being acknowledged by their names, by their preferred names, I should say. And so I think it's the same model, but just more so reflectiveness of culture reflectiveness, but also just creating that safe space, folks still coming into the community centers. I think about the Tobin, I think about Lena Park, I think about all those community centers that I take up space in, and they're great, it's great functioning, but there's underlying transphobia and homophobia that's within those institutions.
I think, Michelle, when you mentioned too how it's youth-led, adult-supported, I think most of us, if we reflected backwards, would say that we would hope that that's how we do it, but that really stood out for me also, because you're taking the lead from them, not telling them what they need. I think that says a lot.
And if I'm sorry,
no.
I find it hard for a lot of BIPOC, Black and Brown youth, to step up and say, hey, service me. We have a mentorship program that's reflective of BIPOC individuals, and it's so hard to will them in and say, hey, this is for you. This is a safe zone. Be a part of this experience. And I want to mention, too, that we don't have no young Black or brown youth today to stand up and say, this is what we need. So there's a gap that needs to be filled somewhere.
Through the chair, the sponsor was BPS invited. Children spend most of their day outside of home. The most of their time is at school. I was wondering if they were included in part of this conversation. They were.
Good.
Sorry, yeah. If you don't mind, sorry.
We did invite them. They were invited to this hearing, Councilor.
Okay, no. And thank you for I see the library and BCYF and all the other city or organizations. Thank you. I do think that's a missed opportunity for BPS to not be here, especially to hear from the panelists directly. But yeah. But I'm almost up with my 4 minutes. Just thank you for, I think, the policy always is what comes next, or should always be why we hold these hearings. And this isn't the only type of, something I know our office is thinking about a lot, that, the the only power we have as counselors isn't just to hold these hearings, it's to be out in the community working alongside you, uplifting your needs and your voices. And this is a good way to start to hear exactly, what you need, but it's on me, right? I can only speak for myself to find out and be out there and hearing how we can be allies and be more supportive. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Burrell? Oh, you took off? Okay. With that, I will forego my questions only because I know we have a third panel. Some folks on the panel have a hard stop. So I'd like to thank you all for being here, for answering our questions, enlightening us as a body as well. You guys are excused, and of course, welcome to stay for the third panel as well, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd now like to call up the administration panel. We have Julianne Lee, the Director of the Mayor's Office of LGBTQ+ Advancement. I believe Pedro, I think, had a hard stop from the Director of Youth Engagement Advancement, so unfortunately I don't think he will be here. Summer Grossman, Director of Center of Behavioral Health and Wellness at the Boston Public Health Commission. David Leonard, President of Boston Public Libraries, and Marta Rivera, Commissioner of BCYF. We have enough seats. Great. Panel, welcome very much. Good to see you all again. And thank you for bearing with us. I know the time can always be an issue, and I know some folks have hard stops and have already had hard stops, so we appreciate your willingness to take your time and be with us here today. I think you've had a lot to listen to in the first two panels, and certainly a lot to absorb, and so we hope to hear from you in this, how we can maybe put some of that stuff into action and create the spaces in some of the areas that you guys are all in charge of. I don't know if anyone has an opening statement, or each of you have opening statements or any presentations to make, but we can start in any order. Be happy to start. You just please introduce yourself and we'll go down the line. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Chairman Fitzgerald, Councillor Santana, other honorable councillors. My name is Samara Grossman, pronouns she, her, Director of the Center for Behavioral Health and Wellness at the Boston Public Health Commission. Also a proud parent of 2 kids in BPS schools, and one of whom identifies strongly with the LGBTQ community, even though she is of young age, currently 13. So I have lived experience at home about what it's like to have a youth growing up in today's society. So thank you very, very much for calling this hearing. It's so important. So I have a few data points. Some of them you might have heard, but I'm just going to try to deepen a little bit as we go, just to give a little more context. I'll give a quick overview on some of the activities that the center is doing to address LGBTQ youth mental health, and some other points as well. Let's see. So hopefully you can see this slide okay. So this resonates with what you've probably already heard somewhat, but trying to link things back to the Health of Boston mental health report that BPHC put out earlier this year. Really helpful report, and as you'll see, there's some deep dives about youth mental health, and specifically LGBTQ+ youth mental health. But as you might have heard before, but in Boston, in 2021, you see that more than 40% of BPS students reporting persistent feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and anxiety, an increase from 27% in 2015. Importantly, on this slide, you can see the big increase, and you'll see this in another chart as well, but as you know, LGBTQ youth face disproportionate challenges, notably higher prevalence of poor mental health for youth than their cis or heterosexual peers. Generally in Massachusetts, as you might have already heard, 71% of LGBTQ youth reporting symptoms of anxiety, with rates higher, 78% for non-binary and transgender youth. So we'll get into that difference a little bit more later. And also, just so you know, this does align with the 2019 Boston Community Health Needs Assessment, showing that LGBTQ youth in Boston, 48% at that time reporting persistent sadness, compared to 27% of heterosexual non-trans youth. Importantly, on some other health issues, just to know it's not just the anxiety or the depression or the suicidality. That report also showed that youth are more like LGBTQ plus youth are more likely to smoke or use e-cigarettes, marijuana, use alcohol, prescription drugs compared to their heterosexual or non-trans youth. So when we look at this Health of Boston mental health report from 2017, 19, 21, and 21, you can see LGBTQ+. Unfortunately, we weren't able to gather data, or data is not yet gathered, honestly, for transgender nonconforming youth. But for LGBTQ+ youth, experiencing higher rates in a range of mental health indicators. So you can see that sadness, purposely hurting themselves, considering suicide and planning suicide, and attempting suicide, unfortunately, is all higher for LGBTQ youth in Boston. Also, you can note that, I think it's on this side, so you can see the purple bar, if you just like run down, that's what I just talked about, but to me it really highlights, like it's the first thing that jumped out at me when I looked at the Health of Boston mental health report. So another reason I'm really glad we're here today. But just so you know, the Trevor Project also showed that in 2024, so this is now, 1 in 10 LGBTQ youth attempting suicide in the last year. And now I'll talk a little bit about the national data that shows that trans and gender diverse youth are experiencing the most severe stressors from their peers, including bullying, lack of family support, and gender-based discrimination, which leads to higher rates of depression, self-harm, eating disorders, and suicidality than their cisgender heterosexual and their cisgender LGB peers. So as you understand deeper into the community, of course, some of this we'll talk about in a sec, but you've already heard there's a term called minority stress, which talks about the impact of the things like what we see going on with the anti-trans legislation, the sort of targeting of youth who are trans or gender nonconforming, and what that really does to youth mental health. As you heard earlier, and is really important to note, intersectionality really matters, and what we were just hearing from and talking about. So for LGBTQ+ youth of color, in particular, who face a dual burden of racism and homophobia or transphobia, or all the above, higher rates of depression, greater feelings of school unsafety, leading to higher absenteeism and reduced academic performance, and an increased risk, which you heard us talking about, of homelessness, violence, involvement in child welfare, and the juvenile justice system. So you can really see the ripple effect of the layers of oppression and what that does to youth. I'm going to skip over some things so you don't have to hear things you've already heard in the interest of time. Just so you know, as you heard, but just to put some numbers on it, limited access to mental health services, even as you can hear the demand growing in this particular population. Resources are insufficient. So in 2023, Association Behavioral Health Care reports that for every 9.2 counselors hired, 10 are leaving the field. Significant workforce gap. And national data shows that 50% of LGBTQ+ youth who wanted mental health care were not able to get it. So I'm very proud to work for the Boston Public Health Commission. I'll tell you about a few things that we're doing to address some of these gaps and to address LGBTQ youth mental health needs in particular, some of which resonates with some of the points brought up today. But in response to what I find very alarming data, we have used ARPA funds to address urgent mental health needs of LGBTQ youth. The investments include supporting through BPHC's community-based training initiative, which is a capacity building initiative. Already underway, we're working with a vendor to increase knowledge and skills for adults serving youth in non-clinical settings. This would be also beyond school, so not meant for schools or those who are receiving or giving care in clinical settings like mental health clinics, et cetera. But after school and summer programs of any type, there's a capacity building program to bring those adult youth workers' mental health knowledge. So this would be like a mental health type of 101. So those that are interacting with youth all the time really understand more about what's going on. But in response to the crisis that we know is here, we asked our training capacity group to work with the vendor to do an additional layer of LGBTQ youth deep dive into youth mental health, so that those are optional. We're not enforcing that, but those that come into that, are juried into that program, are meant to be able to get those additional learning. Additionally, those programs are meant to serve Black and Brown youth in Boston already, so trying to give a focus on that intersectionality and the way those layers of oppression affect youth mental health. In addition, UMass Boston, which already had been given ARPA funds to address the workforce gap by training, let's see, how do we phrase this, broadly BIPOC LGBTQ providers, so students who are learning how to become either mental health counselors, therapeutic mentors. Now we're adding some support for school psychologists, but recently also asked with some ARPA funds to be able to divert to address LGBTQ youth mental health needs in those training programs by adding an additional training layer, including they have someone who has expertise in neurodiverse and LGBTQ youth identities. So again, addressing those oppressed intersectional identities or misunderstood identities. And I'm actually very excited to just have a small moment to talk about our communication campaign, which is coming out, which we've been working on over the past year. All counselors are invited, and you might see in your inbox somewhere, there will be a pop-up, which is sort of the culmination or kickoff of the beginning of this campaign, which is called Heads Up. It's created for youth, in particular in Boston, again with a focus on BIPOC LGBTQ youth, although it's open to everyone, asking those youth to engage in understanding and addressing their own mental health. There's a website, there'll be, social media campaign with the Heads Up hashtag, bus shelters, all the good stuff to get out there, and then this one-time event, which will be a huge sort of bringing youth in, giving them merch, youth performances in a way to really get some acknowledgement and awareness lifted up about how youth can take care of, and as we talked about, empower each other to talk about mental health. So that is on this Thursday from 3 to 7 p.m., and you'll be able to look for the Heads Up campaign. So in conclusion, we can see where we need to intervene. We do want every young person to feel safe, and in fact, see here on this last slide, you can see that LGBTQ young people who report living in very accepting communities like ours attempt suicide at less than half the rate of those who report living in very unaccepting communities. And so I would believe that by bringing this important conceptualization of increasing safe space, third space, or community space for LGBTQ youth, we are actually saving lives. So very grateful for you to bring this forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Rivera, do you would like to?
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Marta Rivera, the Commissioner of the Boston Centers for Youth and Families, BCYF. First, thank you, counselors, and I want to thank the young people for taking the time to share with us today, as well as the providers for your advocacy, your passion, and your persistence. Thank you. BCYF operates the City of Boston's 30 public community centers, including 2 older adult centers, 18 pools, and a beach at the BCYF Curly Community Center. As the City of Boston's largest human services provider, City, capital C, BCYF prioritizes welcoming all Boston youth, especially those with limited access to resources and opportunities. Our goal is to ensure that all youth engage in a safe and fun environment, develop a sense of belonging, connect with a caring adult, and connect with resources for basic needs. BCYF uses an intersectional lens to advance equity and inclusion. This means that we recognize all the diverse identities of our young people, including diverse gender identities. We commit to protect, promote, and empower them, especially those who have been traditionally marginalized. Creating safe spaces for LGBTQIA+ youth is a priority for our department, and to this end, BCYF has accomplished the following. First, we became designated as safe place locations. All of our centers did this past year. Second, we invested in training all our staff to strengthen youth engagement. And third, we developed a program framework with an equity lens. In 2023, staff representatives from all BCYF sites participated in the Safe Place Training, which is a national youth outreach and prevention program for young people in need of immediate help and safety. BCYF joins BPL in this national model to create greater access to resources for youth. Safe places are easily identified by the yellow Safe Place signs on our buildings. Also, this year, BCYF launched the LGBTQIA+ peer leader group at Curtis Hall and the Blackstone, and soon we're adding the Hennigan. Flyers are circulating for youth seriously interested in being LGBTQIA+ peer leaders. We also piloted an LGBTQIA+ Youth Expressions Night in partnership with the Boston Police Department's Colors in Blue. We look forward to continuing these and taking the lead of the youth on how to improve and how to engage more young people. On staff training, 56 BCYF staff have participated in positive youth development training over the last 18 months with Health Resources and Action's best practice, or best initiative rather, including 82% of our youth workers. At BCYF's Academy, which is a 2-day all-staff training in January, our youth workers participated in a job-specific session on promoting gender sensitivity for youth workers. Additionally, 39 staff participated in 3 electives addressing equity topics, including Equity Foundation, LGBTQIA+, Disability 101, and LGBTQIA+ Youth. 3 BCYF management staff participated in a 4-day Equity and Inclusion Academy training to prepare them to train other staff on equity practices. And lastly, on that note, BCYF is meeting with the Equity and Inclusion Cabinet as well as the Mayor's Office of Language Access to plan a 2-hour training for all BCYF staff in the spring of 2025 on creating welcoming spaces for LGBTQIA+ young people. With regards to the development of our framework, which was my 3rd point, over the past couple of years, we've embarked on a process to develop a program framework to ensure consistency, high quality, and equity in all BCYF programming. As part of this process, we administered a youth participant survey earlier this year. From this survey, we learned that BCYF direct service staff excel at forming supportive relationships with their young people. The survey further revealed that 95% of the young people surveyed always or often feel safe at their BCYF center. 92% always or often feel like they belong at their BCYF center. 98% say at least one adult at their BCYF center cares about them. The quality relationships youth experience at our centers provide an essential foundation for healthy development and successful life outcomes. Young people need to feel safe, know they belong, rely on trustworthy adults who care about them, and experience engaging opportunities to connect with their peers and explore their interests. A great body of research tells us that youth with these assets are likely to develop into successful, thriving, and caring adults. Youth who do not have these assets are less likely to thrive. BCYF spaces have served as community hubs and safe havens for generations of Bostonians for over 50 years, and in an effort to strengthen these hubs and improve the services delivered to our constituents, with the support of Mayor Wu and her administration, we've made strategic investments in efforts like these that I've shared today to build staff capacity, create welcoming spaces, and develop inclusive quality programming. All of that being said, we recognize there is more work to be done to ensure every person that walks through our doors, be it youth, elder, or staff, who identifies as LGBTQIA+, feels safe and welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mott.
Good morning, good afternoon. David Leonard, President of the Boston Public Library. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to offer testimony and for your attention to this very, very important issue across our city, state, nation, and particularly with a focus on young people and our safer spaces. The Boston Public Library thinks about these issues through the lens of programs, services, collections, and spaces. And so in each of those categories, we have examples. Staff prepared 8 pages of programs and offerings right across all of our branches and at the Central Library in Copley Square. I'm not going to read it all to you in the interests of time, because I think it echoes and builds upon what you've heard and what our very first panel, our young people in our neighboring city of Milton, town of Milton, were asking for. I think we already do a lot of this work, but there's more to be done, and there's always more to be done as each generation encounters these issues as questions of identity, intersectionality in new and interesting ways. And so, I think the opportunity that we have is to continue doing this in partnership with organizations like the Lesbian, Bisexual, Gay Urban Foundation that we've partnered with, like Boston Glass, like Bagley, like Company One, like the Theater Offensive, programs that are offered throughout the city that we already do work with. Our collections reflect the diversity of our entire community, and our job is to live up to the motto on the front of our doors, free to all, being serious about the all part of that, regardless of who people are or identify as, that the library should be a safe space for everybody, both in our collections, in how staff approach guests, and the programs and services we offer, and to do that more with people instead of not just for people. That in some ways is the opportunity going forward. I'll just end by noting that this is personal. I came out as a gay man in my 20s. I did not have the access to these resources that we have today as a young person growing up in high school. I think my pathway to being fully myself would have been faster and better had I had access to those resources. So this is personal. This is work that I have been doing since the 80s in Dublin, since I came to Boston College and refounded the gay and lesbian student group, which had gone dormant there in the 90s. So the opportunity to champion this work, not just for our LGBT community across our libraries, but for all of Boston, is a real privilege and an honor to do that. And I'm happy to be here with you today on that topic.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to shorten my chat about a half, and I'll let my deputy take over. But I am Julianne Lee. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the executive director of the Mayor's Office of LGBTQIA2S+ Advancement, or MOLA. On issues regarding LGBTQ affirming spaces for our youth, I'd like to personally thank you for bringing this issue up. I appreciate today's youth panelists who spoke so brave with your voices. I have a little one who is 6, and I hope that they grow up to be you. I particularly wanted to thank youth who are watching from home, who may not have felt safe today to attend. I also want to thank community partners in this work. You are the backbone, you are the heart of our city. And to our city councilors who have sponsored LGBTQ efforts and serve as active allies for our intersectional community. Before I continue, I want to introduce you to our deputy.
Hello, I'm Denisha Yancey. I use she, her, and hers for pronouns. I am deputy director here at MOLA, and super grateful for this panel. Similarly, as a young person, I actually grew up in Bagley. I was there till they kicked me out at 22. I worked at Glass, also as a young person and an adult, at JRI Health, Cambridge Health Alliance, Fenway Health, lots of different community organizations supporting young LGBTQ plus people. And so this is really important. I started what I think is still the first GSA in a public middle school in Massachusetts. So also really excited to hear that work with younger people as well. Thank you.
Let me just share a few highlights of what our office has achieved in the past year that have really intentionally centered our youth. MOLA has created leadership opportunities for queer youth through our Youth Fellows program. These young leaders are gaining mentorship, advocacy training, and public speaking experience, forming a pipeline to professional development and higher education. In addition, initiatives like our Amplify GSA program in collaboration with Boston Celtics and TD Bank support and protect gender and sexuality alliances in Boston Public Schools, and ensuring that our students have affirming, inclusive spaces to thrive. This past year, we have shifted Amplify GSA into a larger partnership with Oh Yeah and their Mayor's Youth Summit, which I will have our deputy share a bit more points for Oh Yeah on Director Cruz's behalf. MOLA has been entrusted to steward citywide SOLI convenings, which stand for State of Our LGBTQ Youth. It was begun by Boys and Girls Club, and we continue with multiple community partners, including many of who spoke today, including Bagley, Break Time, Map for Health. This space acts as a way to bring information, resource sharing, and collaboration, and communal action in response to Boston's LGBT+ youth needs. We have prioritized creating affirming spaces. We've hosted youth-focused events such as Bring It to the Hall, where LGBTQIA2S plus BIPOC youth met with city leaders from multiple city agencies, including OEOI, BMA, MOYA, Mayor's Office, and so many others. They were able to share their stories, talents, and in an empowering environment. MOLA provides LGBTQIA2S plus education and training to City of Boston agencies and offices, including many of those agencies up here today, BCYF staff, City of Boston run shelter staff, BPD, MBTA, and so many others who serve queer youth and their families. This training is crucial in fostering inclusive and affirming spaces, which have huge impact on mental health, well-being, and allyship. We've provided mental health wellness workshops as well as overdose prevention and Narcan trainings addressing the alarming health challenges that face our LGBTQIA2S plus youth and young adults. And lastly, and potentially most importantly, last fiscal year, we allocated $250,000 in Beyond Pride mini grants to 51 organizations, directly investing in the well-being and future of our LGBTQIA2S plus community. Among those grants, nearly $1 in $3, totaling $70,000, was dedicated to supporting LGBTQIA2S plus youth. Organizations like Bagley, Boston Glass, Break Time, and many others receive funding for essential programming, ranging from leadership, development, to counseling, to gender-affirming garments and temporary housing solutions. I'll turn it over to our deputy to say a few more words.
So despite these incredible efforts, we have faced overwhelming demand. We received over $750,000 worth of requests for our Beyond Pride mini grants, 5 times what we could actually fund. To respond, we stretched beyond our initial budget of $150,000 and pulled an additional and one-time only $100,000 from our staffing budget from salary savings in order to address these urgent community needs. So that brought our total grant fund up to $250,000 for last year, but this year we do not have that option. Although our office is fully staffed and we are so excited, we will be $100,000 short of last year's grant funding. But the truth is that none of this is actually enough. Less than 1% of all philanthropic dollars nationwide go to LGBTQ affirming programming and services, as we heard from the panel earlier about some funding concerns, and this is an unacceptable disparity. As a city, we would love to see Boston do more to meet the needs of our LGBTQIA2S plus youth, especially in this political moment where legislative and interpersonal attacks on our communities are spreading across the country. In the last month alone, we've seen a significant rise in hate crime incidences in Boston, in our communities and neighborhoods. And the Trevor Project nationally, which offers a 24/7 crisis support line, saw a 700% increase in emergency calls in early November alone. Our LGBTQIA2S plus youth are facing profound political, social, and physical threats at this moment, and those threats are unlikely to dissipate anytime soon. Addressing this crisis requires intentional, informed, and sustained financial support for our city agencies and community organizations that are already doing the work to protect and uplift our young people. And we must not only invest in meeting the needs of our current residents, but also allocate the necessary resources to ensure our city can serve as a safe haven for those fleeing regions where their very existence is under attack. The gap between the needs of our LGBTQ plus young people and funding available remains staggering, unanswered, and unsustainable. Our City of Boston youth serving organizations need more from us in order to provide those affirming spaces and the amazing services that you heard about earlier that our youth need to grow. When we fail to invest in our youth, we risk our futures. But when we step up, as we have seen our city do time and time again, we don't just help them survive, we help them to thrive. We empower them to become leaders, innovators, and advocates who strengthen our city for generations to come. And dare I say, I'm a product of many of those programs. Thank you for your time, your partnership, and your dedication to our LGBTQIA2S plus community.
Thank you, panel, for your statements and presentations. Really appreciate it. We'll now get into questioning. We'll start with the lead sponsor, Councilor Santana. Councilor Santana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, if I could share some points from Oh Yeah, since Pedro had to leave, is that okay?
Yeah, please slide through it. Yeah.
So just wanted to highlight on behalf of the Office of Youth Engagement and Advancement, Director Cruz, who did have to leave, but we have been partnering, as our director said earlier, around the Mayor's Youth Summit. It's the second year this February coming. Oh yeah, definitely made sure that there were LGBTQ focused events offered across the city leading up to the summit last year, even connecting organizations like Bagley, who have such beautiful spaces, with initiatives that needed that space availability. They launched Youth Line, a resource hub for young people ages 14 to 25. They've also hired a full-time resource coordinator to help connect young people to opportunities and resources across the city and within City Hall. And MOLA will actually be able to help hire a fellow that will work with the Youth Line along with their community resource coordinator. They've extended invitations for LGBTQ youth to participate in the Mayor's Youth Council and to specifically bring that lens into that work. And launch Youth Speaks Boston, Youth Needs Assessment for young people ages 14 to 25. They'll be collecting data until January, and then we'll produce a report about what youth populations need across the city, hoping to influence City Hall investments with results. Oh Yeah and MOLA continue to collaborate on our professional development series, which serves to train adults in the field of providing youth spaces. And MOLA continuously trains Oh Yeah staff on competency, as well as them supporting the Suli group.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Councilor Santana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to our panelists from the administration for being here and for your testimonies. I want to really appreciate you all sharing how personal this is, how much you all care about it, and it's great to see. President Leonard and Commissioner Rivera, I'm specifically excited to see you both here, because we heard from, directly from our youth in our first panel about, potentially libraries, definitely libraries being a location, a potential location for these spaces. And I couldn't help to think about, BCYF centers also being part of potentially of the solution here, being someone who I identify as a BCYF kid and had access to throughout my childhood. So my question to you both is a two-part question. First, what current, and I know you kind of went into it into your presentations, but what current programming do you have in respect to the libraries and in our BCIF centers that are specifically for our LGBTQ plus community? And then my second question is, what can our youth and us as counselors as well and do to approach you all and and your departments in creating and opening up new spaces for our LGBTQ plus community? So either of you can start.
So I mentioned two initiatives, right? Specifically the peer leadership that we have at 2 and soon to be 3 sites. And I mentioned the Youth Expressions Night, LGBTQIA plus Youth Expressions Night. Those are the 2 that we currently have that are specific for LGBTQ youth.
And are those happening weekly, monthly, annually,
So the expressions, we've just done the first one at Curtis Hall in September. And so those are probably, we're looking at quarterly, so we haven't done one since September. We take our lead from the young people, and even the idea of creating the peer leadership group and space came from young people at Curtis Hall. And so again, the spaces that have expressed interest are the ones that we've taken our lead from.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think on the programming front, both LGBTQ History Month, October, and Pride Month, June, provide particular opportunities, although this work is all year round, not just once or twice a year. It's just some highlights, working with the History Project to uplift queer history, Boston specific, across locations. Tabling at Pride, both at the Youth Pride as well as the June Pride. Putting on plays in conjunction with Company One, some pride events, some drag queen story time events. Again, each branch chooses what is right for its community, and there's really a rich range of programs on offer.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to get into my second question. I just know we're short on time. So, how possible is it possible, I mean, right, to open up more community safe spaces or whatever we want to call them, and how do we go about that? And I would like to start with Commissioner Rivera, because I have seen some models of this in our libraries. I don't know if I've seen it in our BCYF centers, and I just want to know, is it possible? What's the process? What do we need to do to open up spaces like this?
Yeah, so again, as I mentioned, what I'm referring to as a peer leader group is what we essentially have as safe spaces. So I think that would be the equivalent of what you're describing or what was described by the young people earlier. That is peer-driven, supported by adults, and it is space for queer and trans youth. So we currently have that at 2 facilities, 2 sites. And as David said, we allow the sites and the constituencies or the youth at those sites to drive what they want to see there.
Okay, no, thank you. I misunderstood earlier, so I appreciate the clarification.
Okay, yeah, and so if there is a site where a young person or a group of young people are expressing a desire to start one, that you can easily arrange for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Commissioner.
Both agencies have participated in the Safe Space program, so we've gone through training, we've designated our spaces, we are acting in that way. I think 2 questions become, different people of different ages need different things, and then do we have the sufficient supportive adult role to partner with the space to bring it to life in a way that meets those needs. Whether that's training for existing staff, where there is capacity to do it, or additional staffing to really provide those and other roles for all of our young people. We did hear throughout that those experiencing housing insecurity or homelessness are at greater risk, and how we reach those individuals who might not already be using a library or community center as their third space. Maybe it's one of our partner organizations that we can be even more in partnership with that could provide that.
Thank you. Thank you to our panel. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Weber?
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on Mr. Leonard's last comment, I guess for the Mayor's Office of LGBTQ plus advancement, we had a hearing here on homelessness among LGBTQ plus youth and how it impacts kids of color more than any other. We're talking about kids junior, senior of high school who may even get kicked out of their homes, when they come out of the closet. I guess, what are we doing in terms of outreach? What could we do better, for that community right now?
That's a great question, Counselor. Thank you. I think that there's a bunch of different ways to attack this crisis, and I think that promoting what we already have is a big part of that. And I think it's working with our community partners, with meeting our youth where they are, and doing it in a safe way. Something that our team does is we look at language access. Are we reaching the youth that are needed in whatever language they feel most comfortable with? B, sometimes it is a church bulletin, because that's where the parents are reading it, or the grandparents raising grandkids. So getting really creative when it comes to how we're reaching it. We've also seen that LGBT plus youth, specifically BIPOC youth, are very much multimedia. So getting on social media, really being able to connect with where they are. We are also working to create a resource map with BU Spark and Northeastern. So really trying to map out which resources, both community partners as well as spaces, as well as city resources, to put that in one place for our youth to be able to reach that. And so we're really excited about producing that and working with our partners on that.
And I would just add, I think that we heard from break time during that hearing that most of their money does come from philanthropy and not necessarily from the city. And so that's something that we're looking into as well.
Yeah, we think that none of us show up as having a single individual identity or a single issue, that it's multiple identities, our intersectionality that we bring to the table, and whatever set of challenges we're experiencing in our communities. And I think, rather than look to solve those individually, supporting a true ecosystem, as my colleagues just mentioned, across city agencies, partners, so that the same individuals can come and get different things from different organizations that they need. I think we can do a better job at being aware of what each other is providing and has on offer.
Okay, I don't think the chair started the clock, but just one more quick question for Samara. We've heard from other folks that they have a therapy, they're providing therapy. I mean, what does that look like? What kind of services around therapy do you think would be helpful in a space like this?
Yeah, I think, thank you for the question. I think for therapy, especially being able to identify across the city, and maybe this is something Suli could work on, but where those positive, supportive, LGBTQ plus, IA, Two-Spirit therapists and counselors are, and then also thinking about how to widen that. So are there other ways that we could make really low barrier supports, really listening to what youth were saying, what you've heard across other panels about the importance. I really like how Bagley, for example, has the drop-in so that youth that might not get their support from their families or caregivers to be able to sign off on all the forms and the insurance, et cetera, to get therapy in the sort of quote-unquote usual style, have other opportunities to get support, maybe even if it's not called quote-unquote psychotherapy, but it could be peer support groups. Maybe it's run by clinicians, but it isn't being called therapy per se. Could be another wonderful way for youth to feel supported and feel like their needs are addressed. And then I'm just personally curious in the future if there'd ever be funding, but I know there's something like Talkspace, Teen Space, New York City is running that is like a text-based mental health support so that youth anywhere, I think it's just paid for by New York City Public Health, but for example, they're able to just text counselors, and that's part of the programming, and I talked to them and they're like, oh, it's interesting. The youth, of course, like texting more than they like having the little one-on-one Zoom chats or whatever. So really thinking creatively about how youth actually interface with mental health, and especially trying to get around the stigma of mental health, because especially when you're thinking about intersectional identities, not everyone is going to feel comfortable or from their family, culture, religion, et cetera, feel like mental health is something for them that they'd even want. So trying to find other ways to open up a sense of deep support as they explore their identities, and helping them understand that they don't even have to have an identity. As much as we want to support anyone who falls within the letters of LGBTQIA Two-Spirit, but of course there's youth, it's normal and natural for them to be exploring their identities, so to be able to understand they don't even have to necessarily say, I need a queer therapist, but that they understand that this space is for them as they explore who they are, and that is okay too.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Council. Council Mejia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you all for your work. I just have 3 questions. I'm curious, I always say that Boston is resource rich but coordination poor, but you guys are really working on making sure that that's not the case anymore. So I'd love to hear all the cross-pollinating y'all have been doing. And I'm curious, just would love to hear a little bit on how that looks with immigrant advancement. I know we've had a lot of recent arrivals, and I'm just curious, that is also a population that I'd love to learn a little bit more about how we're acclimating. And then as well as Age Strong. And while we're here specifically talking about youth, I do see an opportunity and programming opportunities for some cross education, like I think someone mentioned earlier around LGBTQ education specifically for grandparents. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that looks like. And I know Curtis, I know you're no longer on the panel here, but I believe our office worked with you many years ago around mental health and wellness during COVID, and you were one of our panelists. So I just want to say thank you. You did say something here on the panel that I'd love to hear from the administration, specifically around youth of color. I think it's important as we continue to have these conversations. While I understand everyone is at risk, I'd love to hear specifically what programming looks like for LGBTQ plus youth of color in the city of Boston. I think that that is definitely something that I'd like to hear more around, not just programming, but policy and kind of what we're doing in BCYF and how we're creating space for those conversations to happen. And then the last question that I have is around space creating. Yes, creating safe spaces are important, but I'm curious about what role, if any, you all see small businesses playing into these conversations. How are we activating spaces, non-traditional ways, like looking at restaurants are always doing things, like how can we really tap into those folks who are doing business in Boston? And then lastly, since we're targeting businesses, I always think that our higher ed institutions, they need to pay their pilot taxes. I'm gonna keep saying that. And in addition to that, how are we organizing and working alongside some of these higher ed institutions to engage them in some of this filling in the gap, specifically around funding and what that potentially could look like?
I can start us. Thank you for your question. I'm a huge believer in that we are strongest at our intersections. I will always say that. I say that to my daughter every single day. We say it as a team at our staff. I am a firm believer in that. So I would say, first of all of our equity and inclusion offices work continuously together. We have really great relationships. We meet on a weekly basis with all the EDs, so in constant communication and partnership with folks like Disabilities and Moya and Black Male Advancement, Women's Advancement. We know that with our recent arrivals, that is an intersection that we are wanting to build out even more of a muscle. And then I will say, with that continuous communication, what I've seen, or at least my staff have seen, are folks come into City Hall and really see MOLA as a beacon of safety. And so we will get folks coming through to us that have a lot of immigration issues and questions, but they will start with us first because of their trans status or because of LGBT, being a part of the LGBT plus family. So I would say we really act as that beacon, and then we do warm handoffs all the time. Literally physically walking folks over, letting them know their pronouns. And so we're really building and continuing to build that muscle. And then I'll say, just as far as the Age Strong piece, I come from Age Strong background. Before this role, I was at 6 years with Commissioner Shea at Age Strong. Age Strong is my backbone. And so I have a really big eye on where, the team and I are really focused on our youth, but specifically with our older adults, because we know that our youth lean so much on their older adults. And so we are in deep partnership with the Pride at Hyde Park. Who's got Hyde Park? He's gone. With the Pride and Hyde Park. And they are building out a community center that will be open for and including intergenerational activities. We have a really great relationship with Age Strong, including David Reedy, who is the LGBT plus liaison, first ever at Age Strong, continually inviting him to our events and making sure that, that our LGBTQ older adults are included in everything that we do, but specifically the older adult allies who are raising queer kids, always making sure that we are really bridging the gap areas around intergenerational work. Personally, I've seen friends and family where parents of youth might not be supportive, but grandma is. And so really keeping in mind that our LGBT plus youth's chosen family include those older adults, and that's at the heart of what we do as well.
Councillor Mejia, if it's okay. Are you going to go?
Oh, I was just going to add briefly that actually the E&I Summit is today. I'm actually hoping to get there by 2 o'clock for my responsibilities, but we also work with the Equality Fund, so on the resource piece, making sure that folks are connected across different opportunities. We send out weekly communications to our mini grant recipients on other opportunities that exist as well as SULI that we mentioned earlier, where we're able to connect people and make sure that everyone knows what's all available.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I just wanted to highlight and also speak to my own passion for equity in the work that we do, especially at the Center for Behavioral Health and Wellness. So I just wanted to point out in alliance with your question that our RFPs that have gone out always include the equity perspective. So whether we're looking for diversifying and expanding the workforce pathway, increasing capacity building, doing communication campaigns, always looking towards those intersectional identities and specifically putting in those RFPs that we're looking for people to be able to advance BIPOC and LGBTQ work and being able to address and say in their responses how they're going to address those intersections, including who on their staff represent the communities that they serve, which communities do they serve, do they understand the intersectionality, are they able to address it, are they able to understand social determinants of health when they're responding to us, so that we, like you were saying, that we don't just sort of approach things as, although it is general, we need a lot more funds to address what's happening even here in Boston, but that we are really deepening and understanding who we're serving and why there might be some needs for additional focus funds and thinking for those intersectional identities. So thank you for the question.
I would just add the importance of the role of partnerships, both in your first and your fourth question, I think. Specifically when it comes to LGBT youth of color, and the opportunity with the Theatre Offensive, with the Urban Foundation, with Company One, to ensure that where we might not have our own expertise everywhere, we can rely on partners who do to fill up those gaps. So again, I think it speaks to the general ecosystem point of view. And I do think the intergenerational question is a both and. Yes, young people need their own space, but it's not one or the other, nor is it queer only. Sometimes you need queer only space, sometimes you need allyship as well, but they're different. And just being acknowledging of that. And I know that BPS does have a strong GSA program, even though they're not here today, so I want to uplift that. And certainly the library, public library, continues to work with both the schools and school library where we can.
Great. Well, thank you. I'd just like to conclude, seeing that that's all the councils that are left. But in closing, it seems like we're in a really good place. I think the youth would be happy to hear from the other panels, right? That it's great to hear that libraries BCOF are safe space certified, and you're thinking about that. And as you go forward, it's great to hear some of the programming that you're doing. Great work from MOLA, BPHC with documentation and data to back that up and find out what we need. Certainly there's some areas that we can improve around BIPOC and making sure they feel safe and heard as well. And outreach is always, I think, an issue in any initiative the city takes on, right? It's always about how do we get the word out, and that will continue to be our issue, and we'll continue to try and perfect that. But I'd like to thank you guys all, and I feel stronger about this initiative going forward. I feel better, and I hope the youth does as well. And I hope that you guys can connect with them as well, because I was thinking about the data points they were providing, the data points you were providing, and I couldn't really see them up on the screen. I said, I wonder if they're the same numbers, and where you guys get data and how you can share. And going forward, please use these folks as a resource as well. And we'll try and get more youth involved from the city, of course. But thank you all for coming here, and thank you all. Do we have any public testimony? One person in public testimony? Great. Online? Great. Pale, you guys are relieved.
Thank you.
You may leave, and we will listen to the public testimony, but thank you again.
I also just wanted to thank the administration. I love that a lot of the leadership is queer and we're out, and it takes a lot of bravery to be out, especially right now. So I also wanted to do a hat nod to all of the leaders who are LGBT plus in the city of Boston, being out and sharing our experiences and being brave about doing the work.
Well, you are one of them, and thank you for continuing to lead, Julianne. Thank you all. We'll now go to Amara online for some public testimony. Amara, you have the floor in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Amara, and my pronouns are she, they, and I'm the Sapphic Circle Facilitator at Bagley. For people unfamiliar with Bagley's programming, I know it was already kind of covered, but Bagley has a bunch of different affinity meetings run by youth and young adult peer leaders for people who hold specific identities, like trans and non-binary meeting, Girls Room, and Sapphic Circle. Sapphic Circle is a monthly meeting for youth who identify as Sapphic or have any sort of connection to Sapphic identity. And as a facilitator, I plan topics and facilitate discussions, as well as sit on the youth leadership committee and help with all of Bagley's programming work. I originally found out about Bagley through just like online searches because I was trying to find ways to get more involved with the queer community here in Boston. I'm originally from Long Island, New York, and I came here to attend Wellesley College. I'm currently a sophomore. And I grew up in a very conservative Muslim household, and thus I grew up essentially hiding my queer identity from family and friends. So being a part of a space like Bagley where I can freely express myself without worry has been extremely rewarding because I'm also able to help other queer youth at the same time. And just being able to exist in the center, whether I'm working or not, and having people around me who I feel safe around is very healing. I find that a lot of queer spaces often, or on the other hand, Muslim or South Asian spaces are very contradicting and are often not accepting of one or the other. But I feel that at Bagley, I never think that I have to choose between my culture or my queerness because everybody around me celebrates both. Bagley has also given me opportunities to do things I never thought I would be able to do, like travel to Berlin for a cultural exchange earlier this month with the German consulate. And opportunities like this are one of the reasons why it's so important to support queer youth and organizations like this for people who might not have the resources or family support to be able to do these kinds of things otherwise. And it's also why it's important for the Boston City Council to ensure that all youth, no matter their gender and sexuality, feel supported and safe navigating a world that can so often be unaccepting. Thank you.
Jamaat, thank you so much for your time. Next, we have Levi. Levi, you have the floor in 2 minutes. Thank you.
I just wanted to say hello and thank you all again for giving us this space and bringing it forth as something that we need and will continue to need. And I also want to just really quickly remind you guys that it's never a bad idea to invest in young people, no matter who they are, what identities. Always invest because you know that they're the future to come. So you might as well put your money where it's right. I wanted to reintroduce myself. My name is Levi Cruz, and I'm 22 years old. I am a trans man and have been for a very, very long time. As a kid, I was always involved in whatever my school and community had to offer me. I was in clubs such as GSA, anti-bullying clubs, community services, and I spent my every moment that I could at the Boys and Girls Club. So much so I even won Member of the Year, which I'm still very proud of. And these programs and clubs gave me the strength I needed to keep going while I was trying to find myself. I was suicidal while I was trying to figure out who I was, and I was unfortunately a part of those very devastating statistics we heard about earlier for our LGBTQ plus youth, especially for our BIPOC youth who mental health isn't a conversation in households like mine. Once I graduated, it was on me to find a space representing everything that meant so much to me. There's not a lot of resources out there that kind of, just hand it to you what you can do after you graduate for things like this. And I know for me, something that was incredibly important was something that was youth-led and passionate about progressive change, because I know there's always change to come. And then come to find out, Bagley had offered all that and more. I originally came to Bagley as someone who wanted to get more from my community while also trying to provide more. My therapist sent me a flyer to train my public speaking skills because I do sometimes struggle with it, and become a public speaker with Bagley. Back in April, I convinced one of my friends to come with me to their Speakers Bureau event, which was a weekend-long training. And after that weekend had come and gone, we had a great time, and we were certified to be public speakers with Bagley's Public Speakers Bureau, which is why I'm here today. This was an opportunity that they had given me. And since then, I was able to join the Youth Leadership Committee as an intern for the Heart Clinic. The Heart Clinic stands for Health Education and Risk Reduction Team. This year, the team is made up of our program manager, our clinic coordinator, and the 4 peer leaders. In short, we offer low to no barrier STI testing and health navigation services with or without insurance for anyone 29 and under. I have seen firsthand the amazing outcome that comes from this service being available to young adults and youth. When health education and risk reduction is accessible and no barriers put in front of it, and also all-inclusive, it transforms lives of not only the people who need it, but also for the allies involved. Something that we are currently working on at Bagley, and everyone is welcome to join, is our celebration and event for World AIDS Day that happened just yesterday, December 1st. On Wednesday, December 4th, from 6 to 8, we do have an event that is education-based and community-based to learn all about World AIDS Day, HIV, AIDS, and what the medication PrEP and PEP is. Everyone is invited to come, and there's powers in numbers and education, so I hope everyone does join. But to finish off with an amazing quote from our talented community engagements manager, KK, that really has resonated with me. She says to take care, take agency, and take action. Thank you.
Levi, thank you very much. And thank you for coming up to testify again today. Really appreciate it. With that, this hearing on docket 0998 is adjourned. Thank you all very much.